up every morning. I don't know, just, you probably don't speak 70s and 80s.
Yeah, I don't think.
Highway to Hell?
No, that wasn't going to be it. I was actually thinking that.
Fortunately, I did not.
I'm sure.
And I was like,
Basketball starts Friday night. Late night we're going.
Yeah.
I'm going to 2 games later.
Your daughter toured us with her.
Doesn't quite have that same impact, you know.
Yeah, she was
But they will have the with addition.
No, there was one addition made on Friday.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Everybody's here. 601? All right. Who is that? Should we wait for him?
so he couldn't get home in time.
Okay, go ahead.
She said, Dad, I'm not going by myself to that thing because of anybody.
Well, she was good. She really was. Very mature. It was all there. Maybe we just have
Well, she'll be 16 in 7
yeah,
days.
pull out the one chair.
She's going on about 46.
Just pull out one. We don't need
She's that.
All right.
Dad, put your phone down. Molly and I called a bus kid. I mean, it's sad, but it's true.
See Molly the other day.
We're good. Good evening. I'm going to go ahead and call to order the October 9th, 2017 work session, joint work session amongst CVCC, the Alexander County Commissioners, and the Alexander County Board of Education. Everybody, I think, has been given copies of the questions that were topics for discussion, as well as the Board of Education's responses to some of the questions that the commissioners posed. And it's my goal, I hope it's all of our goal tonight, to come to some positive solutions and understandings of all of our respective expectations and desires, goals, kind of a mission statement for where we want to be with certain, in particular the early college, but also some other questions that were posed. So I hope everybody's looking forward to a good, positive, professional meeting, and if we have to agree to disagree, I'm good with that, and I think everybody else is. But Milton and Milton, I don't know if you would like to make some comments.
Well, I think for me, getting an understanding of all the stakeholders and what their responsibilities and what their commitments are going to be is probably very important moving forward. I think the primary question that certainly the Board of Commissioners had was the early college and, you know, where that's headed as far as growth, size, you know, conceptually, what do you see it to be, and kind of understanding that, especially from a facility perspective, I think was the first and foremost thing. And then I think the other question, I think the reason we scheduled this now was kind of wanted to, I think you guys have your enrollment numbers for this year, so you kind of segue into know what you could be facing next year. And I think those were the two main topics that I think we were wanting to discuss.
Okay.
So, and I know a lot of questions spin off of that, and I agree with you. I think there may be some things that, you know, you can put your thumbprint on glass to hear, but not to hear. And, you know, so we may all not land at the same place, but at least we'll know each place everybody wants to be.
Great. And we appreciate CVCC being here. I believe it's Keith Mackey and John Watts and Jeremy Fortner are here representing CVCC.
Mr. Fanson.
I'm sorry, and new director, Brett Vance,
Sometimes called the new Linda.
So we appreciate you all being here. Mr. Campbell and I discussed last week sort of how we thought it best to proceed with this, and we just thought we'd start with the groups of questions regarding the early college first. I tried to group the questions as best as I could into sort of categories so that we can try. There's a lot of questions, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussion, so I wanted to be as efficient as possible. If I miss something, please, everybody feel free to jump in, because I think we want this to be conversational, so that we can all sort of put our 2 cents in and as Mr. Campbell said, sort of reach an understanding. I'm going to start with the questions from the county commissioners to the Board of Education. There were the first 5 questions were kind of dealt with the population and the enrollment of the early college, so I want to kind of cover those together. And the Board of Education is going to rely, of course, on Dr. Hefner for some of the data and the answers, and I'm sure the commissioners will rely on Mr. French, and then we can engage in discussion if that works for everybody. The first 5 questions are, what are the growth objectives for the next 3 years of the early college, i.e. number of students? How does this number of students compare to the Challenger School in Hickory? We have one high school that feeds students into our program. How does that compare to Challenger in regard to growth numbers? And in the event the early college grows to perhaps 300 to 400 students, what effect does this have on the high school? Will there be less advanced placement programs, potential for larger class sizes, underutilization of the facility? What impact does the early college enrollment of that size of 300 to 400 have on elective courses such as ROTC, art, chorus, band, and CTE? And what percentage of the ACHS population has already transferred to the early college to date? So all of those, I believe, deal with the enrollment at the early college. And I think that if you'll look at the answers from the school board to the commissioners, you can see the answers to most of those questions are posed. And members of the audience here, we're going to try and put these up on the screen so you can see the data that we've collected to answer the questions. But essentially, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Hefner. What we've compiled, it looks like, is we're going to try and take 17.5% of a given class into the early college from this point forward, which is a pretty good reduction in the actual number of students. But with the varying size of classes coming through, we didn't want to over-challenge one particular class, so we looked at a percentage. So,
And I can tell you, in looking at this year's 10-day enrollment data, each class, as far as each grade level of children, that number fluctuates a bit. So we thought, instead of saying every year we're going to take 100 children from the class, that it was best to look at a percentage. We looked at 15% and what those numbers would look like, and we looked at 20% and what those numbers would look like, and then landed in the middle of the two at 17.5%. And you can see moving forward what that looks like for each class. Currently 151 children at the early college. Then in next year, 2018, 17.5% of the rising freshmen would total 51 children. 2019, that total would be 71 children. And in 2020, 73 children. And you can see that if the first group, if all 56 graduate, at that point, the maximum capacity would be 294 children.
One question, because I can't remember this number. How many students are, well, before early college started, how many students were, I guess that's not a fair comparison. So how many students today are in the regular high school?
1,300. Deborah, if you'll step to my office, beside of my computer, I have the first 10 days of school, the numbers for each school. Bring those to me, please.
But it's roughly 1,300.
A little over.
1319 paper says.
So 14. So I wanted to get a starting point of where we're at. So 1,400, and that's not including the 151 that are in the early college.
Does not.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? That current number, 151, that would be freshmen and sophomores, correct?
Correct.
What's the breakdown of freshmen and sophomores for that 151?
Out of the first class, there were 56.
Okay. What was the total incoming freshman class this year? A large class.
this year.
Yeah.
If I get those 10-day numbers, I can
Okay.
tell you. And then the second part of that, how does it compare to Challenger? I think a fairer question is, how does it compare to other one high school districts that have an early college? And that's what the second chart will demonstrate here. We looked at McDowell. They currently are operating their one high school system. You can see the number of students at the high school. If somebody driving that could scroll to the next chart. You see that McDowell, you see their high school number, their early college number. I spoke with Mark Garrett personally last week to verify those numbers. He said there has been such an interest that they intend to increase that to 300 next year to accommodate for some of the overage that they are seeing as far as applications. Ash, they have been granted approval to open an early college, but that's not scheduled to happen until fall of 18. You can see at Davie what they have at their high school, the number in their early college, and the percentage that equals. In Watauga, the same. Allegheny does not have an early college, and then Challenger is comprised of a mixture of high schools totaling somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 students. And you can see our 17.5%. The difference there, it varies by system, but we felt like that was in line. Thank you. Chairman Campbell, you asked about this year's incoming freshman class. On the 10th day of school, we had 311 freshmen.
Dr. Hefner, do all the early colleges that's listed there, they have a similar program on a campus, or are they on-site, or?
The only one that I'm aware of that's on-site is at Watauga.
Do they have like a wing of the school that's dedicated, or?
I don't know. Again, that was a conversation with the superintendents, how I know that it's held on the campus of the high school. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, or Mrs. Chairman, Matt, one question, and this is for the CVCC folks. Is CVCC comfortable with, with the anticipated numbers, or number of students for the early college? I know there are facility questions, which is actually, I'd say, the main reason we're here. But what's CVCC's opinion on, size of Alexander Early College?
We're open to providing opportunity for students who are interested in the early college. Of course, the facilities, as you mentioned, the space is the concern as far as it grows to. We have four levels of grades there at the early college, but we are open to the number of students that we currently have. I think we're looking at 75 entering next year possibly, and I think that's a number that has been discussed at some point, so a little more comfortable with that.
That was a number that we discussed previously. I mean, we heard you all loud and clear, slow it down, 100 per year is too many, even though the interest has been there. We also have been surprised, pleasantly so, at the interest level. But we were talking about reducing from 100 to 75 before I started playing with percentages of classes. And instead of a flat number, that's where that percentage came in. And you can see that the rising 8th grade will be based on the 10th day of school, 335 children would be rising freshmen next year. And that's where we ended up with 17.5%, was about 51 children. So at maximum capacity, if the original class, all 56 graduate on time, would have us at 294.
Is there any statistical data? I know we won't have it because we're so new in the program, to children that enter it and then go back to regular high school. Does that happen much?
It happens, but I can't say how much.
Okay.
We would need to, find out from some of those schools like Challenger. They've been in operation over 10 years.
Yeah.
Dr. Mackey, you might be able to speak to that. I can't.
We do have, Challenger's a little different because there's really not a home high school because the students come from middle school directly to Challenger, so that is their high school. We did have a matriculation process at one point where students who were not doing well academically or have behavioral issues, they would go to the school that was in their district. Also, there was a requirement early on that students had to complete their high school diploma and the degree at the same time. And they backed off a little bit of that, and students make as much progress toward that as possible. However, this past year, I think we had 75 graduates, and 72 had both their high school diploma and their associate's degree completed at the same time. We moved away from that matriculation model, and we work with the students. Unless there's significant behavioral issues, they continue to challenge until they complete.
So they know them just to opt out, because I mean, I think socially it's different for children.
I think
And that would be my question, where they're doing okay, if they just say, you know, I just rather go back to regular high school. That's kind of.
I think at in early college, there was at least one, I hate to call them children, but one child that was their freshman year, decided he didn't want to stay there, went to ACHS as a sophomore. And I think it was mainly the social.
They can return to the high school if they choose.
And
The
that's their
social
own
piece is a big
pace.
part of it,
Right.
you know, being in an environment where they're comfortable.
Dr. Evans, you can maybe answer this. I know we talked a lot of numbers and statistics on attendance. What does, and the numbers here, you know, that looks like, you know, a pretty good trend, you know, going forward with the amount of going. But how many, when we had Challenger, about how many did we have going to the Challenger?
The agreement was, Mr. Reese, that we would have 40 enrolled in that program. So the agreement was 10 per class would be approved to go to Challenger. And I know I've said this before, I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, but once those 40 were approved and accepted into Challenger, then they became students of Catawba County, and they were no longer counted as our ADM.
So now these are counted.
All of these count in Alexander's ADM. But now granted, we still have some students at Challenger, because the agreement was if you started at Challenger, you got to finish at Challenger. And so this year, we did not have any freshmen to go to Challenger, but we still have sophomores, juniors, and seniors over there planning to finish.
And you also have to provide a bus or transportation.
We do provide.
But that will end when this sophomore class graduates.
Yes.
Dr. Hefner, do we have a number on how many are still attending Challenger?
Yes, I emailed the principal last week. I think, Mr. Pennell, she said 36. We're still there.
36 times the state allotment, $6,000.
$6,000 roughly, multiply 36. Yes.
I apologize for being a few minutes late, but what's the qualification for the application process? Is there a bar or a
There's
standard?
actually, they
or-
use a rubric, and it was modeled after the rubric that has been used at Challenger. But it takes into account a lot of things. Academic achievement is one area. If they are ESL, considered ESL, minority, if their parents are college graduates. And some, the rumor out in the community was if a parent had graduated from college, you were automatically knocked out of the running. That's not true. That's just one of the things. And what they do is you get rated points on a point system, and then they do a cut. And if your number is a certain number and up, then you are offered an invitation to be a part of the early college.
And has that proved to, for whatever academic standard is in there, are they succeeding? They're doing well, I guess?
Well, we haven't had any that had to go back to the high school because of not succeeding academically. I know that, you know, some have experienced academic struggles that others have not, But tutoring and different things are in place, and thus far, nobody has had to go back to the high school because of academics.
I have a question for, I guess, maybe CVCC. We've talked about how many is there, 51 that potentially can be going. The 51 we're added today, would there be sufficient space for 51 more at CVCC?
That's a good question. Brent, do you have,
Well, given that the newer building is somewhat during the day consumed with the classrooms for early college, there's additional classrooms to also accommodate cohort on the wing where the commissioner's room is. So all those classrooms have been consumed for a majority of the day. They're starting to move down the other hallway, and we do have some other programs daily that really we can't change at this point, and that's our CNA program, our phlebotomy program. Some of those are kind of standalone classrooms, and there are basic skills classrooms. So really at this point, in terms of growth, we're kind of at capacity during the day. So with the growth, that's what hopefully we're going to be considering some other options. Is that building rated like at 400 people maybe or something like that? I'm sorry? Is that building capacity like 400 or? I don't have those numbers off the top. We just had Russell come over and kind of recalculate all of our numbers, but I don't know that off the top of my head right now.
We had a,
Russell said it's 400.
Is that about 400?
we had a meeting with Dr. Henshaw when we had our work session, and he said the primary center can hold up to 340 students, but I'm sure that doesn't include personnel and the other.
Right.
And if that changes, then Mr. Green could tell us that.
And that was without equipment. If the equipment stays where it is currently, maximum capacity was 240.
For those classes that have the equipment located in the standalone classroom.
An empty class or just seats would be where the higher number would come in. If the equipment's in there, it reduces.
Correct, if the equipment has been removed and it's just seating area,
Yeah.
yes.
What kind of equipment do we?
CNA
for
class.
CNA. Oh, okay, for those classes. Or a computer lab. We have several standalone computer labs that we only have 20 stations. Now, if it were just, we pull the computers out and just have regular class, we could accommodate a few more.
I got you. But why don't we do this? I'm going to make a suggestion here. I've been in a lot of these meetings. We're kind of getting off track first. Why don't we let Dr. Hefner finish her program here, and then if we've got any questions on that, we'll ask those, because we're going to be here past midnight if we don't, let her move along. So we're only on number 2 right now. So.
And some of the elderly will be asleep by then.
Well, are you wanting Dr. Hefner to go through all of the answers to all 19 questions at this
Well,
point?
if she wants to, but I'm giving her time to do whatever she wants to do, not that I am.
Maybe we take a group of
We-
maybe 8, and
Well-
then pause, and then do next, because I'm afraid if we go through all of them,
Kind of hit the high
This is a
spots.
lot to digest, and I know we've went through this, the public hasn't, so why don't we, just talk about the main points of everybody's issues, which I know what it is on the county commissioner's side, but, maybe not on the school
Okay.
side.
I don't know that at least for the commissioners, or for those of us that have had this information, I mean, I assume everybody looked over it the way, I don't feel like you need to
Okay.
go line by line.
maybe hit the bullet points.
You know,
and
if
then
there's,
need
as we
refer to
kind of,
data,
as
you
we
show
kind
the
of,
data there.
right.
Okay. Can I bring, on CVCC side, since we know we talk about the numbers because we need to talk about our facility size. So you can see from the chart what the numbers are, but I was wondering if it could be addressed about the multi-campus, what is it?
Multi-campus designation.
Multi-campus center designation, because I think that's important to CVCC, which is driven by the numbers of FTEs, which is full-time students, essentially. Am I correct? And if it is designated as, or if you get the designation of the multi-campus center, that brings with it a certain dollar benefit, which is sort of going to help us be able to address our contributions as the county commissioners and the school system. So if you could speak to that and what the requirements are, because we have to bring the numbers for that designation to happen. Is that correct?
Correct. And we're working on an application, it's due the 15th to the state board. We have to have 300 FTE, which is full-time equivalent. That's based on student hours in class. We're very close to that. We think we'll pass that next year. It does require approval by the state board, and we go to the legislature for the funding piece. So there will be additional funding with that to hire staff for the college, and faculty, and so forth. We're hoping to increase our services to students and student services, counselors, advisors, financial aid, faculty, and so forth with that if we get that designation.
Question, it sounds like that funding is primarily to fund teachers. Is it restricted to any other purposes? You know, one of the requests was security, maintenance, that type thing. If you get that status, can any of those funds be used to help with just operating costs that are
It's my understanding that it's restricted to operating costs related to academics.
related to academics? Okay. So teachers.
Yes.
Teachers and teacher support, like you mentioned, liaison between the colleges.
Librarian? Anything like that?
Potentially, yeah.
Okay.
Bathrooms, because teachers need those.
I think it's important to understand that with that, also, those students still count under Alexander County's ADM. And so even though CVCC's funding is increased, that doesn't take away from our roughly $5,700 per person ADM. So really, you're kind of double dipping at that point.
Question. You know, we're talking about getting our Alexander County students put in the program, just like we sent students to Challenger, and I guess surrounding counties, if they have an early college, is there any opportunity to pull in and take that $5,700 from an adjoining county, or are we restricted in that? I mean, if we're offering more, like what you just said, and we have more programs, you know, instead of like what we've been sending $40 and $5,700 times 40, do we have the opportunity to bring 40 in at $5,700 that we weren't capturing?
Well, I will tell you, we're trying to capture the homeschool population and make this opportunity, first of all, we've tried to educate them that this is happening. It is indeed something that they can apply for, and Dr. Peel, as far as the criteria, they're held to the same criteria as far as the matrix that is used to see if they have points, if they score enough points to be an applicant into the program, but that is the population that we're trying to lure back to the public school system through the early college.
Let me throw something out here. So the early college, which is a part of Alexander County School System, is located on the CVCC campus. Is there an agreement with CVCC about locating the early college there?
No. A signed agreement, you mean like?
A signed agreement, anything? How did this come about without, because we have, Alexander County owns the property, and we have a long-term lease with CVCC. So how did this come about without a agreement? There has to be some sort of agreement.
Right.
I can speak to that a little bit, Dr. Mackey. If the initial agreement was in the grant application itself, because it was written that that's how this would be, that the early college would be housed at the Alexander site. And that was actually signed off on by 3 entities: CVCC, school board, and commissioners.
Okay.
So that, I think, would be the initial step to the agreement, is that's how the application was written.
And was that grant application, what was funded in that?
In year 1, nothing. In this year, $200,000. It went all the way to the General Assembly. We were given permission to open, but no funding followed that for year 1.
Okay. So, I guess, and I'm just gonna, lay it out there. The facilities are the big issue with this. That's the big issue. We just need to get it off the table. That's the big issue with all this, is the facility. We have a CVCC campus that was used for engine education, lots of other different types of programs. County commissioners, along with CVCC, I cannot get that right. It's been a long day.
Just 2 C's.
And the school system and our major businesses in Alexander County, citizen input over a period of 8 years. That's about how long it took to get the Applied Technology Center up and going and open. And we do have training programs there, but it was not meant to be a place for the early college, nor was it, I hate to use the word sold, but nor was it sold to the public as it was going to be a place for early college. It was a place for economic development, and continuing education and training programs for our businesses in Alexander County. I'm not saying that early college is not a good thing. It is. It's a great thing. I'm all for it. But there needed to be a better plan on the facilities and locating these students before we went headstrong into, adding all these students. There was no plan. And so we've done the best we could do, which was scrape together space to put them in places where other things ought to be at right now. So that's the issue I have with it. And I'm ticked off about it. I'll be honest with you. I'm mad about it. That was not what I worked so hard for to get that place open. And we need to think about what can we do to make both things work equally, seamlessly. A lot of people put a lot of work into that, and I have no problem with the early college, but to be where it's at right now is not where it needs to be. And so we've got to come up with an alternative. I don't know what that is. We can hash that out, but we need to slow down and find a place to put these students that's going to work for everybody. My 2 cents.
So when you say where they're at right now is not where they need to be, you mean physically?
I mean physically, yeah.
Okay.
Do you mean numbers also?
Huh?
Do you mean numbers?
Well, I don't even mean numbers. If there's somewhere for them to go where it can support those numbers, then so be it.
Well, I'll be honest, this freshman class I thought was abnormally large. The total number being that, 75, 70 times 4, 280s, maybe 300. That's a much more comfortable number, I think, for me. I think, and again, I think as a percentage of your class, that seems to make a lot of sense. It just, I think we had a little shock and awe on this freshman group that was really large, much larger than, and again, maybe a reason for that, but, the 70 times 4 or 75 times 4, when you compare to those other one high school counties, seems to be, kind of in a reasonable percentage. And I'm probably one of the ones that's been kind of sensitive, and maybe this is an unfounded concern, but the effect on ACHS.
Well, that's actually question number 3.
Okay.
How about we get to that?
All right,
Will
sounds
that
good.
work?
Great segue.
Well, I didn't mean it that way.
Question 3, for the most part, what impact does the early college have currently or will have on elective courses at ACHS, such as ROTC, art, chorus, band, CTE, etc. Well, I guess the thing that I want to start by saying is that we have never moved forward with anything with the intent to hurt any student. It has only been to enhance and add to opportunities. So none of that stops because of the early college. And I want to recap some of the things that we have done. But before I jump into advanced placement options and what we've added in 3 years, I just want to make sure everybody understands the way that teacher allotments work from the state. That's done by a number of children per grade level. And let's say in kindergarten it's 1 to 17. In first grade it's a different number. Those of you who served on our school board, you understand that. And while these students at the early college, their junior and senior years, will primarily be taking college courses through college instructors, we are still getting state teacher allotments based on those numbers, because they don't divide it out and say, oh, those children are going to the early college, so we're not going to allot any teachers for them. We still get those teacher allotments. So when these students hit their junior and senior year, we're going to be sitting on, and I'm going to guess, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 11 positions that we won't need at the early college, and we can backfill some of those things to continue to add opportunities for children in other schools, whether that's additional visual arts opportunities or whatever the need may be when the time comes. But I want to start by saying that so that everybody understands nothing changes with the state ratio. I would like to recap what we've done with advanced placement courses, and you all have this, but in 15-16 we added back an AP course, environmental science, because we heard from our students we want more AP courses, so we've worked to do that. In 16-17 we added back an AP chemistry, and in 17-18 we have added AP government. So none of that suffered. Again, none of this has ever been done to hurt anybody. And you can see all total what our current AP offerings are. Then we also have partnered with the North Carolina School of Science and Mathematics. We are offering those courses virtually to our high school students. Again, another opportunity they didn't even have before the early college. We have continued to work to increase our cohort opportunities at CVCC. We now open that up to juniors and seniors, where before it was only available to seniors. So I hope you're getting the picture. We're trying to expand for everyone, because it's no secret, people now, they want options. Families want options, and they want to feel like they've made a decision based on the best option for their child. So that's what we're doing here. We have also allowed freshmen to double up on math and science courses. Before the early college, that wasn't even something that we practiced at our high school. You can see there's another chart on your answers. Advanced placement opportunities at Alexander High School, McDowell, Ashe, and Davie. You can see current enrollment, AP classes offered, percentage of participation in AP courses, and then the exam pass rate. JROTC programs, excuse me. We have added in a chart that is showing you the ones that have the double asterisk. That indicates one high school systems. Other high schools, Newton Conover, Hickory City, McDowell, Ashe, Davie, all have thriving ROTC programs. So again, this doesn't take away. Does it mean that we have to work maybe a little more creatively to advertise what we're offering at the traditional high school? Sure. We need to be in the middle schools talking about these programs so that as middle school children and their families, they can start deciding what they want when they get to their freshman year. Other things that we have added in here, I'm going to stop there. You can see a demographic breakdown because there was a question as far as AIG students and what percentage of AIG students were going to the early college versus the traditional high school. We put in there everything, males, females, white, Asian, black, Hispanic, 2 or more races, students with 504s, students with an EC plan, AIG, ESL, and then first generation, we weren't really sure about the high school as far as the percentage of children who would be first generation. Something else that I just want to mention, we as a group of leaders, of school system leaders, took the time this summer to look overall as a system, what's happening in our system. I come before you all every year, and every year in my superintendency, I talk to you about declining enrollment. It's not a secret. It's been happening. It continues to happen. So we as leaders, and that was at the school level and the central office level, we looked at how many children did we lose overall as a school system last year. And overall, from the first day of school to the last day of school, we lost 72 children. You can see the chart where those losses came from overall. You can see also we tracked where did they go. And if you don't think that families are looking for options, look at those numbers for homeschool, Christian and private school, at the high school level, the adult high school diploma. Those that go to other public schools, that's a wash for the most part. They're in another public school somewhere. But then look at charters, and then how many ended up dropping out overall.
Dr. Beth, just, so the other public school, that's just somebody that maybe moved or they just transferred?
Yes.
Not for really any reason, just they left the county?
Yes. For the most part, that's how that happens, yes. Those other things are a little different story. Look at the homeschool numbers, the Christian and private school, charter school. Those are different stories.
Do we have reciprocal agreements with adjoining county schools?
We have reciprocal with 2 of the 4. We do not have one with Catawba, and we do not have one with Iredell. We do with Wilkes and Caldwell.
Dr. Hefner, if I may,
Yes.
ROTC, band, chorus, you know, I appreciate the gathering of the numbers from other systems, and that's good. But what does it mean to us? You know, what are the enrollments in those programs for us now? Are they holding their own, or have they seriously declined? You know, are we down in CTE and ROTC and art and chorus and band? What's our status with that?
Well, we're not on probation to lose our ROTC program anymore. They've been able to recruit enough that they're up over 100 students. I don't know what the state guideline is. I don't know if 100's the magical number. I don't know, but I haven't heard of any other declines. I mean, students for the most part are getting the courses that they want. Art, band, those kinds of things. Where we're running into things is some of the students, their parents want them to have everything. They want them to have art and band and all those things. And sometimes what happens is the day's not long enough for them to take everything that their parents want them to take.
So all those other courses for us right now are doing well.
As far as I know.
So with the numbers showing that we want to try and recapture some of the students we're losing and offer the opportunity of an early college, I understand, or I hear Mr. Mayberry's frustration with the students being in the building, on the campus where that wasn't the original intent. So I guess moving on to the facility piece, my question at this point is, what, if anything, Dr. Mackey, can CVCC do to help us with facilities? Because if we're growing our numbers, I'm assuming the multi-campus designation helps CVCC. So that's a good thing for you. We obviously are in a position where we need to find a place that is either bigger or I don't want to use the word more suitable, but that may be the best choice of words, for the students in a growing program. So what, if anything, can CVCC do to help us with facilities?
Well, there's been some discussion, of course, around that, going back to what Mr. Mayberry was saying, that the technology building was built for industry development and industry training. We've had some discussion about the possibility of the Alexander Center daytime becoming the early college. The college is continuing to use it at night, and of course, training industry in the new building. So that's one possibility that's just been discussed as an option without adding additional. There's been some discussion about the other building that's there, the smaller building. We toured it when we were working on the technology building to see what possibilities were there, but I think it's currently maybe for storage, but there'd have to be some upfit in that building.
I think there's also some concern about having the early college and the early college programs and the students in the Applied Technology Center due to the EDA grants that we got through the federal government, and how that may not be allowed. So we're not really sure at this point.
Have you received clarification?
Have not yet.
I have a question, and I always appreciate Commissioner Mayberry because he's just to the point. He's our strong Thurman of 2017. I appreciate that. So, is it safe to say, because 50 folks roughly have been indicated or vetted to go to school, so it's not about 50 or 55 or 45. It's about location and space.
For me, it's about location. I can't answer for the other commissioners. For me, it's about location because we had numerous meetings, numerous task forces, grant applications, elections and campaigns that were run on, hey, I oppose this, or yes, I'm for this. In the end, the Applied Technology Center came out on top. And I went back and I looked through some of the questionnaires that the school board members answered over the last few years. And there was one blurb by one, and I believe it was Karen, that's mentioned early college in answering the questionnaire. There's not been a lot of publicity other than through the meetings on this early college that people outside of the school system or people that have kids in the school system that are going to early college have had input on. I'm fine with early college. I think it's a good thing. If you'll ask Linda Graham, and go back and ask her, one of the first things I did when I was elected, 9 years ago, was, hey, what can we do to expand college education opportunities in Alexander County? But also, what can we do to keep our businesses located here in Alexander County? And that's one of the things that we did with the Applied Technology Center. And to be honest with you, if I had kids, I wouldn't want them up there in a technology center going to high school. That building was not designed for that. There's, adults up there that, maybe high school kids don't need to be around. So it would be better if we found a different place for them. I have no problems with the numbers if you want to put 400 in there. You guys were elected to come up with the curriculum for our school system and what direction it needs to go. We were elected. The only part of the education part that we have any authority over is how much money that you get through the budgetary process and facilities. And anything else is not within my authority, and I shouldn't be telling you what to do. But those two things, we have a purview on.
Well, I need to make this clear. First of all, our Board of Education nor I create curriculum. we have state standards that are mandated to us, so we certainly do teach state standards. And I hope that I'm not being too bold, but did you have these same reservations, Mr. Mayberry, when we sent the application to the commissioners for review?
No, I thought this was gonna be on a temporary basis.
Okay. Did something in that lead you to believe it was just
I'll have to go back
temporary?
and reread the application. But the way it was explained to me was this was gonna be just a temporary thing, and
Temporary housing or of students or temporary early college?
no, temporary housing.
Okay.
There. So, but no, I did not, I thought the Applied Technology Center, the students being there was just a, very temporary thing, so.
I see where you're coming from, I truly do, and I think if we can get adequate funding and people to stand in the gap for our debt service, it's within the grasp of this group to find a more permanent, and he makes some valid points about integrating adult students with early college students. I mean, I agree with that wholeheartedly, but, sticks and bricks are expensive, so.
Is it my understanding, Mr. Mackey, that if we house the early college somewhere besides CVCC, then that defeats the purpose of the FTEs? Is that
No,
what
not the FTE, but the purpose of the early college is to put students that may not be successful in college in an environment where they're with regular college students. So it's called the power of the site. So they actually, in early college, they are actually in class with adults. I mean, that's part of the actual power of an early college. So we've got a little different situation here because we don't have a full-fledged college campus to offer the wide range of classes that we have. At this early stage, given the challenge we have with space, I think we could look at, if such space is available, a site other than Alexander. But looking at growth,
Other than the Alexander Center, that's,
but for long-term plans, we go with early college, and I think what leads to success is the combining of those students with traditional college students, and you do that on the college campus.
What was the long-term plan to house them? What was the long-term plan for the early college facility? I wasn't a commissioner whenever what the grant was.
you're talking about when the
Yes,
application
yeah.
was put in, what was the long-term plan?
No, yeah, what, just period, from the school board, from what the grant said, whatever, what's been the desire for the long-term facility?
I don't know that anybody ever nailed the long-term plan, but I know that we certainly started talking even before the General Assembly approved that we could open the early college. We were already talking about facility needs, because you can look at the central and quickly surmise that that certainly was not large enough for 400 students, and that's what the original grant application was written for, was 400 students.
Where did those conversations take place? With commissioners, with school board?
Primarily between Mr. French, myself, and sometimes Dr. Mackey, and also I know that Dr. Henshaw was involved in a conversation.
We've got to be reminded that the funding, the grant funding that we didn't get this year, that's in the terms that we're speaking, is a pretty small grant, $250,000.
And that funding could never be used for a facility.
Right, no.
That was understood going in, that $315,000 was never intended for a facility.
But we've never received the full grant amount that we've applied for.
No, this year was $200,000.
How does that compare to the staffing cost? Is it close? Is it 2/3?
Well, see, some of it's state allotted because of the student numbers counting for the school system. But obviously, there were things not covered in that, such as the clerical position over there would not have been covered in that. All of the teaching positions would not have come out of a state allotment. But the dollar figure, I don't have that exact dollar figure.
Kind of segueing on Ryan, my thing is, we've already got the early college. It started, it's going, it seems to be a lot of interest. think what we have to do now is get the number it's gonna be, then back into how we deal with that from a facility side. I mean, you know, cat's already out of the barn in that sense. I mean, we're already in the early college business, so if it's gonna be 300, what does 300 require with what we already have here, and how we can utilize it, or anything else that we can utilize? Because, I mean, we're already, I mean, the game started. We're in the second quarter. And so you don't unwind it. I mean, because it is a good thing. I think unilaterally, everybody in this room thinks early college is a good thing. It's not for everybody. It's not for all your students, but for a certain group that you vet through, it's a good thing. So, I mean, it's almost like we need to, if we know the number is going to be, then get back into the facility piece. I mean, we sit here all night and talk conceptually, and we'll be meeting again next month conceptually. But if it takes 300, how can you figure out 300 with what we have here today?
And two things I'll mention is that we're always back and forth on, well, why can't we use the old Ellendale school building or the old Wittenberg school building? I know neither one of those are perfect, but they are. The Wittenberg's going to be empty soon enough. And I know you put something in here about your.
I did. Those discussions have been held since 1998.
Yeah.
I was able to pull board minutes, and September 21st, 1998, in a work session, the division chief and the AIA consulting architect from the Division of School Planning recommended that the old Wittenberg Elementary School should not implement a regular education program in that building due to small room sizes and the lack of areas for special programs.
Okay. So what we have to do is figure out where do we go. Okay.
Well, one question I had for Dr. Mackey, when you were mentioning your discussions, is there a timeline for that? A timeline of where your discussions are going to move forward?
As far as space related?
Yes.
Well, as Brett mentioned earlier, we're close to capacity of what we currently have. So if we bring in 50 more students, and you know, go back to the numbers that I mentioned earlier, I think 75 we talked about it, and Dr. Hacker mentioned 50. 50, given our current space and so forth, are more manageable. Because you're looking at 25 students in class, you're breaking those into 2 classes, or having 4 classes and 4 classrooms and so forth. So just as far as putting that puzzle together, it does fit a little bit better. But we are we maxed out what we currently have, so we're looking at having to expand really before by next fall, if we accept 50 more students.
But as far as a timeline where we would know whether, and the commissioners would know whether CVCC was willing to carry some of that burden for facilities, about a timeline for that.
I would have to bring that back, talk about Shaw, with the trustees.
I don't know that we have any monies. I know we don't have any monies for facilities.
That's not my question there.
Right. No.
I would start around it all.
We don't have money for facilities for a new building. One question I did have, and maybe I missed it. What percent of those who applied were granted admittance into early college?
I'm going to just tell you estimated numbers. We ended up in the parent meetings giving out about 160 applications. The last I recall, about 130 came in, and 100 were accepted. And those are approximate numbers, about that number.
So how do we decide to deny 30 people?
Well, we were operating under the grant, the application that we actually submitted, and the plan was at that point, Mr. Watts, is to accept 100 students per year for every.
That cap then?
Yes.
But I guess because we got the grant money, the second year, you pretty much got to play by the grant rules, where the first year, since they didn't fund it, you don't have to necessarily play by the rules.
That's right. I'd like to add one thing to the, we're throwing out possibilities to try to come to a resolution. And I just don't want it to get lost. I mean, we're, from the
CVC standpoint, I think Dr. Mackey would agree with this and the rest of our members. We can move in whichever direction, you know, we feel like's best. If the two boards, your two boards come together and want to move in that direction, I think we can move either way on that. And I know there's a demand, you know, for the early college, but there's also the CCP program and the cohort. And, you know, I think we've kind of gotten, and I know it's not the same as the early college, but there's, you know, we're at a capacity issue. I mean, we're talking about a capacity issue, and so if the demand's there, I think those programs can expand from a capacity standpoint. Now, it won't be the early college necessarily. I mean, we talked about how constricted it is from a facility standpoint, but the CCP, you know, we can have adjunct professors. I mean, there's several things that can be done with CCP and moving that program forward if the demand is just, you know, too much to bear in the near future, which it sounds like maybe that's the case, maybe it's not. But that's just something not to cast off, that we have that capability for juniors and seniors in the cohort. And I guess CCP, is it for only juniors and seniors also? Or I mean, I guess that houses the whole program, right? But
we're out of room and out of time for the pace that this program's moving at, for the facilities that we have. We can't build anything, we can't renovate anything, we don't have the time, and we don't have the facilities at the pace this thing's moving at and how fast it's growing. I mean, I don't know what to do.
Really, if we started today, it wouldn't be ready for the next upcoming semester, you know, early college start. But I'd just like to interject, just as Mr. Mayberry stated, I'm all for educating early college, providing funding what we can at the level that we can. But our technology and training center, if you go back a few months, I don't know how many months that's been, Borealis, one of the national companies that we landed, you know, coming to Alexander County. One of the big things, I believe if I'm correct, was our training technology center of trades, because they were interested in expanding their business and, you know, adding more employees than what they're going to start out with here in Alexander County. So if we can get that, that's going to help out our tax base, and you'll look and see really tax hadn't moved much, sales tax either, in Alexander County. But if we can get people wanting to come in, you know, with some jobs and with some things, then hopefully that's going to help us all. But for the short term, you know, we need to be able to come together and see, I'll just say it, who's going to spend the money and how much money, you know, are we looking at, you know, from each one that's involved. So, and, but, you know, like that's kind of, we're coming down to the red line almost, you know, for moving to do something.
And I know you, Dr. Mackey, you spoke about one of the reasons to have the early college on the college campus is to take courses with, you know, with adult students. But how many adult students do you have that are taking classes with the high school students currently? I mean, is there any, do you have any number?
Right now it's all
We,
high school.
in the welding program, there are high school students and adult students together. And that's brand new this semester. There's over 30 people in it, so that's a great thing.
But regular transfer classes?
Regular transfer
probably.
classes, not at this time. However, as the early college grows, when the early college students start taking more college credit classes, the intention of that academic dean is to open it up to the public as well, if all seats are not filled.
The courses outside of early college, the CNA, phlebotomy, CCP, all of those, can we move those to somewhere?
Yes,
Well, the downfall of the CNA program, and anybody that knows about that, is the room has to be approved by the state. So there's measurements, literally with the curtains and the size of the room, how many it will accommodate. There has to be a state person to come in and verify that that is a training facility. So it would take some time, I think, to do that, to find a space that would work.
Quicker than building a building now, I mean.
Well, indeed, I don't disagree with that.
Are we sacrificing those programs or any of, are we turning away people that are coming for phlebotomy or CNA or whatever it may be because we don't have the space now because of early college?
No, we're running a series of classes, and we're coming close to filling almost every one of them.
Okay, all right.
Yep, so we're not turning anybody away right now.
Okay.
And I would say too, in the Applied Technology Building, the Furniture Academy, I think we've had close to 60 graduates, 100% employed. Welding's running full speed. Of course, we've got metallurgy starting. Those programs have not been impacted by the early college. That space is still dedicated to that. There was an area for expansion that wasn't covered by the grants, but there are 2 classroom spaces there that can be used for a number of things, but they're currently used for classrooms. But we don't have the money, we didn't have the grant money to upfit that area at that time. So far, that's continuing, but we are getting more requests from industry for different types of training, mechatronics and so forth.
Well, I've been here from day one involved in that program. And that expansion space was there for expansion, okay? It was not there for early college. I'm not, like I said, it was not put there for classroom space.
That's true. I think you guys should be impressed that I haven't said more than I have.
I was gonna get mad.
Actually, my wife told me to keep my mouth shut, but, no.
I think you need to mention, because there's a lot of people in this audience, you have a child.
I'll say, as the father of a sophomore at the early college, my daughter and I have had lots of conversations about, well, not just me, but, around the dinner table, we talk about school. And my daughter Hannah is very much what I would say, or what I would assume to be the fit for the early college. And she looks things big picture. She's mature compared to her dad, even. But kind of what I'm getting at is these kids are not, they're not your typical high school kids. These are the kids that are already thinking, hey, I want to study midwifery and I want to be a midwife, and oh, by the way, if I do this early college thing, hey, Dad, I only have to go to Emory or Wake Forest or Vanderbilt for 2 years. And I'm going, well, what a deal for me. Okay, but these kids are already thinking, when I'm 22, I'll be making the average salary of a midwife, which is $114,000 a year, and all my buddies will just be getting their bachelors. And that's the kind of kids that are there. And when it comes to the facility, these kids would love to have a facility that was theirs, that was I think at this point they feel slightly displaced because, we're using this building and the commissioner room is where we eat lunch and, and all this and all that. And, and they hear the thing. They understand, they hear hey, we got in trouble because there's ketchup on the carpet, but hey, this is where they're making us eat lunch. They understand that they're using technology, you know, the furniture or the whatever technology, and I don't know how many times we, you know, but they understand that they're using this extra space instead of this building because they really don't have a place. And, you know, we all have to, I guess it took me being on the commission at least a year or two, to realize this is Alexander County. And even though some of us may think we could change something overnight, we can't. And with it being Alexander County, we have to understand that there are, you know, just like anywhere else, we have constraints. One of those being we don't have a whole lot of money for anything, let alone, you know, and no matter how much we would all love to build a brand new facility with all the bells and whistles and everything that would be just absolutely perfect, like they're doing in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, and they're doing in, you know, in Wake County, and they're doing in Guilford County, and they're doing in these areas that are, you know, this population's growing like crazy. We're losing population in that age bracket. But I think, you know, like we said, we're already in the second quarter. We've got to figure something out. And what we figure out right now, does it have to be the answer for 20 years down the road? In my opinion, no, not necessarily. You know, we've got 150 kids there now, roughly. We've got 50 or 70, however many, you know, potentially coming in next year. Obviously, I'm very much in favor of the early college. I have an 8th grader, which she'll be a freshman next year. She's not at all interested in early college, and that's because she and her sister are very different. She's more like me, and is, you know, doesn't want to miss anything that goes on amongst any other child her age. But we, you know, I think we all need to kind of, and I'm saying this from, you know, the commission's point of view, the school, you know, the Board of Education's point of view, and CVCC's point of view, we all kind of need to just say, okay, what can we do right now? And I'm not a Band-Aid person. I'm not a stick a Band-Aid on it and we'll let it ride down the road. But at this point, I think if you asked the teachers and you asked the students at the early college, you know, would you, if we said, hey, we're bringing going to set mobile units up, they'd be thrilled. And that's crazy to say. And, you know, and I'm not saying that, hey, you know, we want to say, look at our early college, we're in a bunch of trailers, woohoo. But, I mean, that's, at least they wouldn't be, pushed around. And actually, I know several of the teachers, outside of, you know, school stuff. And I think that's kind of, you know, they would love anything better than what they have now, because I really don't feel like they don't have anything right now, if that makes sense. And, you know, and I think we need to kind of look at, okay, we got to do something right now, and we've got to have some, you know, some plan down the road. Will it ever be a brand new facility with, you know, all the bells and whistles and everything that we'd all like for it to be? I mean, you know, money's not coming easier, no matter how hard we try. You know, and I kind of, you know, do I have an answer? I mean, I guess if it was all up to me, I'd figure something out, but it's not up to me. You know, but the last thing we need to do is continue. We can't continue the way we are because there's no room for it. And I think, kind of like Chairman Campbell had said, and I think Commissioner Mayberry said it as well. I'm good with 400 kids being at the early college as long as there's somewhere for them to go.
That's good.
You know, I mean, I'm just saying, you know, I don't have a problem. You know, if there's legitimate, you know, if there's legitimate interest and success, I mean, why in the world would we be against something that allows a child to, you know, to excel, well, I don't want to say, well, excel and or, you know, get ahead. But frankly, you know, CVCC, I love how you guys say, yeah, there's no money for facilities. I mean, hey, do we have any money for facilities? I'm sorry, there's no money for facilities, you know. And, you know, and school, you know, and the Board of Education says, yeah, we don't have any money for facilities either. You know, and that's kind of the way. But at least from my perspective, it's funny how, it's weird how, you know, I was on Board of Education for 8 years. And I understand, you know, the Board of Education cannot own real estate and cannot owe money. Man, that's cool. You know?
We can't raise revenue either.
I know, right. Well, I tell you what, I don't know if we can raise revenue anymore because
You can. You've done well.
you know,
We're
because
done.
we've been there, done that, and you know, and when you look at our tax rate versus surrounding counties, we're the top. I mean, you know, our tax rate's higher than anybody else's, you know, that touches our border, and you know, so it's not, like I say, it's not real easy for us to just, you know, clap our hands and come up with it.
Well, the demands on your social services are greater than in Alexander County than they are in a lot of the counties you compare yourself to, because the county still doesn't have the tax base.
Mhm.
You might have a big tax rate, but you don't have the base. And a lot of folks, if we live in June and Ward Cleveland, then we don't understand that DSS over here has to serve a multitude of students and families. And the alternative school serves those same families. You know, we got kicked in the shin over the alternative school, but you really need to visit because you have to have an education plan for students who have fetal alcohol syndrome, and I could name 20 other things. But I'm convinced, and I swore I wouldn't kick Ryan in the shin with statistics, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to stick to that. But if we can build and pay for an auditorium, then we can build and pay for a early college. The auditorium's paid for. Your legal debt margin is good. Your fund balance is good. You know, we're just like Alexander County. We can't pay cash for anything. We have to finance it. That's just how we've always been. So I think we sell ourselves short if we say we can't. I think we have to say we will, because, you know, the county has us in a good financial position. Yes, I love to pick on them about their tax rate, but they're in a sound footing.
Did you make sure you write that down? Somebody, did you get that?
Yeah. They're on sound footing, and we all went through the recession of 2008, all of us, but school boards can't raise money, and we can't borrow it. But there's a need here that we can address, and with relative ease. It's going to be time consuming, but this is not hard. You know, I just think we need to talk to the LGC, see what we can borrow. Really, I'm saying we, but at the end of the day, it's the county that borrows on the school system's behalf. If you don't have available land, I guess we have to look for some. I mean, that's what it boils down to. Josh doesn't want to put a Band-Aid on anything. Nobody on the school board, we don't want to do that either. Both entities work to get away from mobile classrooms. One, because it's a Band-Aid, and two, because it's a safety issue now. You know, who would have thought of tornadoes in Burke County? So, but
To the same thing, I was on the school board when the auditorium first came out. I got probably about as much grief that is this last tax increase. But, you know, we had our planning and everybody worked together and it worked out, I'm sure Mr. Grinch would agree, it worked out good, you know, for everybody to, you know, do it and to look ahead. And I was just thinking another couple of weeks ago, they had an event going on at the auditorium. How did we get by without having that? And we also done some field house. It wasn't a brand new one, but we, you know, brought some things up in the old one and built, you know, the new one too. So, but that's what it takes is, you know, the planning, everybody, you know, kind of coming together. After you get through that initial shock of, we're gonna do this, you know, so I think that's, you know, a good strategy. But I think we're to the point where even any building we got, if we started probably today, it wouldn't be ready by August.
You're right.
Especially if the pace of government moves, let me tell you.
Oh, well, and another thing, you know, I'm not saying that we're not gonna do this, because we're a long way from doing anything right now. But it's hard to justify building a new high school when you have declining enrollment at the old high school and through the school system in general. So, one of the things that I would like answered is, education and how we deliver education is changing quickly, and it's going to change a lot in the next 10 to 20 years. So what it is looking like, we don't exactly know, but we can try to make predictions. How is that going to impact our facilities needs over time? A lot more college is being delivered online, and that's just going to continue to grow and grow and grow. Are we going to look at building a new high school, and in 20 years we don't need that? You know, that's the question I would have to answer before anything. What do you think it's going to look like? You're involved in education. I'm not. So, but I do know that the growth of online education is going to be huge in the next decade. Would you agree?
Well, we're seeing the trend, we're starting to flatten out.
Well, and I was
Of
going
course,
to say, and some of that, you know, can't be done off campus,
Right.
but some can.
For the right, like for our cohorts, for instance, we've really stressed putting faculty physically in the classroom with the students, because of age and so forth. That's worked out very well. There are some broadcast type programs that are available, and also, of course, online. We're seeing on campus a move back to the classroom, where online is still very prevalent, but it's starting to level out. And a model that's been well accepted is a hybrid, where a person maybe attends class one night a week, and then the rest of it's online. So we're seeing different variations of that. But it does impact the need for facilities, as you're saying.
And I think the community college system, people just don't realize what, you know, a treasure the community college system is in North Carolina. And I'm not saying that because you guys are sitting here. I really mean that. I guess the four-year colleges, the transfer degrees, the humanities degrees, they're going to be impacted probably a lot more with the online education than your hands-on type of things.
Back to the pink elephant. You know, I really appreciate what CVCC does. I appreciate what the school system does. I think we do and have done, for my knowledge of history, done a pretty good job with our children when it comes to education. But you can't always do all the things that you want to do. Sometimes you got to say, we can't do that. We can't afford that. That's, you know, so where do you draw that line? You know, Volvo's the safest car out there, but, you know, we don't all drive them because we can't afford them. So, I mean, somewhere, what you want and what you can afford has to compromise. And that's our big question. So what do we want, and how do we get it?
I
I have a question about the building that's not in use, or I guess you mentioned storage. Would that building hold the amount of students we're looking at? Or would the CNA program, could you flip-flop them somehow and make one building hold everybody? And what would be the cost of that? Is it something that could be done? I don't really know how that would work between the three of us, but.
I think that, Mr. French, correct me, I think it's about 10,000.
12,000.
12,000. And we haven't had drawings done or anything, but we were thinking maybe 6 classrooms in there, and so that would give us some options as well. We can move CNA, we can move phlebotomy classes, we just have to have those approved and so forth. So they can be moved around, it just takes a little bit of time to get state approval for that. But that would give us maybe 6 additional, like I said, that's a rough estimate.
Dr. Mackey, it's 7,500.
7,500.
Yeah.
Okay, 7,500. And do you have any idea of how the cost? Have you looked into the cost of doing something with that building?
I'll say, just throwing numbers out there based on other things that we're looking at, I mean, a minimum $200 per square foot.
And we,
Unless you do a metal building, maybe with a brick, that's all.
when we talked with Dr.
Existing
Henshaw,
buildings.
I'm just thinking that.
Talking about up to.
Oh, you might have to have somebody, you told me.
Kind of money
So you're saying
for
$200
renovation.
to upfit?
If we could get the building, if we could open up that
I
other
don't know
piece.
how it costs so much.
Talked about that, and that's back in the summer.
That's what
I know,
I got a question. You know, we've talked a little bit about the size in 300 to 400. And I think we're facing that facility study you had done showed that all of our schools are pretty much underutilized, with maybe the exception, maybe Hidnight. It's pretty high. But, you know, the high school would go for, I think it has capacity of 1,650 plus or minus. And it would be down into 1,000 to 1,100. And your cost of keeping that up is the same whether you got 1,600 students. Well, maybe it might be a little bit more if you got more wear and tear. But you still got your utility bills, your roofs. On a facility, you know, you're about 70% utilized on. And I know we bounced around in the early college. You don't want it on the same campus as regular high school because you want to differentiate. But I know we've got a freshman academy, I think, this year that's on a wing that I think studies shown keeping them separate is a good thing in that freshman year. Just hypothetically, internally, would that be an option to wing the early college? Because you'd have easier access to your extracurricular, your band, your course, as well as your 2 gymnasiums. And, you know, maybe the stupidest idea out here, but, you know, just throwing it out there.
well, I know that's not the model.
I-
We all know that's not the model, but it may be something that we would have to consider given the desire for continued growth of the program with rapidly reaching capacity at the location we're at until we can come up with a longer range plan.
Buys you some time.
Well, I think I've already heard we're maxed out pretty much. Even so, we need something from today
Yesterday.
till August, if it's gonna work, I guess, or the
What?
day before. So,
We're not maxed out for this current year.
Correct.
You're saying that
but
with
it's
the
gonna
upcoming,
take- to be prepared, we wouldn't, if we started today with a building,
right,
if you renovated or even built, typically, it wouldn't happen at least a year.
Plus you gotta borrow the money.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a
And you gotta go
process.
through all of them. So my thing is, where do we go?
Well, I know we talked a little bit about Ellendale Head Start. I know probably the biggest thing there is the geographic divot. I mean, it's just not central.
right.
That's why, to me, if you could possibly get by to wing at a high school, it's at least central.
And talking about the old Whitbrook School,
Yeah.
I don't see that would ever be a viable
No,
option.
I think we're all in agreement, I think we're all in agreement the old Wittenberg Elementary is far beyond.
Yeah.
We've already lost our grandfather clause. We no longer can be an education facility. If it's been something else, now we'd have to meet building code requirements from day one.
Well, if you only get a building permit in the last couple of years, you realize how bad,
It's just breeze right through.
how bad that facility is. Or if you have a small child that plays basketball.
Make that option.
Still won't call it possible. this, and I'm not trying to, this is not a, trying to create any kind of issue, problem. But as we look down, you know, as we look into our crystal ball, into the future, and if population trends continue the way, you know, the federal census says it will, the way, you know, the information we get from Western Piedmont Council of Government, the information, you know, from DPI, those kind of things, and we continue to see decline in our student population, you know, between, when I say that, I'm talking all the schools. I don't, you know, just mean, hey, the high school because we're taking kids out for early college, or because, you know, this or that. I'm talking, you know, there are fewer kindergartners each year. And I know at some point, you know, there's going to have to be a kind of looking at everything and what's the best, you know, what's the most feasible, best thing to do from a facility standpoint. And like, kind of like Commissioner Mayberry said, you know, it's not my job to tell the Board of Education what to do, especially, but, I mean, has there been any thought given to, okay, we think we're okay for 5 more years or 10 more years before something has to be done in the way of consolidation, or, you know, I mean, because I know that's, you know, that came up and it was a nasty little, you know, nasty little deal for a couple months.
Couple months.
Not a couple months.
Well, Harry's
great.
His beard.
Yeah, but,
When
no.
you look at DPI's numbers compared to Western Piedmont Council governments, there's a little bit of difference in, you know, their points of view. And, you know, nobody wants to close the school.
Oh, no, absolutely not. I mean, you know, and that's.
Yeah, and you're better off really not, you know, you go talking about it, you might as well, in the community's eyes, you know, just pick a school, you're closing them all.
Oh, I know.
So, but, I hope, and I've been fortunate enough to sit, well, a lot of people in this room have sat in those seats, because we're foolish enough to run, and they're more even foolish to put us in there. But if we get some new faces, you know, nobody aspires public service, but if you've sat in both seats, you know, I digress, we did go through a recession. The people's gonna go where the jobs are. Well, the county has been trying, with the industrial park, et cetera, Craftmaster, Snyder Mills, all these, you know, they're trying to build the base. But it's hard to reestablish your base when you look at Catawba County, they've gone through the same thing. You look all around us, you know, they've lost multitudes of jobs. And, you know, we're in a rebuilding process. And I'm optimistic that the numbers are going to stabilize, because people are going to migrate where the jobs are. And I don't mean marginal jobs. I mean jobs that have some level of benefit, some level of security. And it's just that, you know, the need for an early college and to help save. At the end of the day, we're helping parents who probably can't afford to send their children to school anyway, because it's going to be a struggle. You know, so that's what
Or they have 5.
Yeah, or folks like you that have
Yeah.
5. They just didn't know what to say
They,
weird.
yeah.
But,
Because
you know,
they,
I won't
They
say
can't
I
say
don't,
no, they're white.
I don't agree with DPI's numbers, but I think our situation is far more stable in this county than people, you know, give us credit for. I mean, you can look at the state treasurer's website. It will tell you the financial condition of the county, the town. So to say woe upon us, I don't think we're there.
But if it's interesting you said that, because Western Piedmont Council of Governments presented the other night at our meeting,
and our long-term growth was, it wasn't real positive, wasn't flat, and wasn't negative, if I'm not mistaken, it's maybe 3%. And a lot of that growth was in older people, but the fact is that it was stable.
Right.
You know, while looking at the other folks around us, it was pretty drastic for some of the ones that we would think are pretty successful in Burke County and I mean, their numbers were alarming.
And actually, household income, was it household income or earnings per, it was basically earnings per job were better in Alexander County than any of our neighbors.
Yeah. Well, 14 point, I wasn't there at the meeting, but I think it's almost 14.8%.
Yeah.
And I would hope that the next time we met, that, you know, I think the Western Piedmont Council of Governments, they have a valid place at this table going forward, based on the number of grants that they've helped both the town and the county get, their analytical data, et cetera. You know, I wish more citizens would get excited about county, but let me tell you, it's more about football, baseball, and that's fine. I love sports, but this data is the real stuff. It is the real stuff that impacts the lives of those 50 or 100 or 150 kids we're talking about. But moreover, the vocational students, you know, that the counties address that need, CVCC, et cetera. You know, you can go a long way with a vocational 2-year degree.
Absolutely.
So, I applaud what they built. And if I had an idea that we were infringing on their space, that wasn't, and I can understand where they're coming from, that they want to grow that for specific businesses, to train those workers and have the room to do it with. That's real easy to understand. But,
So it sounds like probably what we need to do from a school system standpoint is come up with like a real short-term need, and then a longer-term projected out need, and then present that to you at some point in time, along with CVCC's input, to try and figure out where we can get this early college. We all agree it's a good thing, and it's going to help your economic development. You have all these, I would think, if you have a lot of choices in your educational system for families to come to, you have good jobs and you have a good school system, it's not, you know, it's not hard to figure out why you'd want to come here. But I think if we do a short term and a longer term, I don't want to say long term because I don't think any of us know the state of education 15, 20 years from now. And then be able to come back with perhaps some options that we could partner. I understand Mr. Watts, no money for facilities, but the county commissioners and the school system as partners with that vision going forward could try and come up with a solution.
Both of us have, you know, increased our fund balances over the years, and, you know, so we'll sit down and hammer out something.
It sounds like we need to be ready August 1 for another 50 students somewhere, and then probably 1 to 3 years need to have something this is the plan, this everybody's going to sign off on it.
Sure.
We cannot, this is where we're comfortable, this is where you're comfortable, but and August is going to be here before we know it.
And
That's the scary
I'm
thing to
wondering
me.
if we need to talk, Dr. Mackey and Mr. Fansler, even earlier than August. Have I been misinformed that the welding program is expanding in the Applied Technology building, and that there is a possibility that we will need to vacate the classrooms that we currently are using in that building as early as January? Is that true, or maybe I misunderstood something?
It's my understanding that currently welding for their classroom portion uses the computer lab that we have, and there was a need or desire to have one additional classroom at a certain given time. I don't have that in front of me in terms of when that is, but the request was to have one additional classroom for lecture.
And I'm assuming that it would have to be one of the 3 that we currently are using in that building.
Possibly, and I'll get back to you on that for sure.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we are not addressing something that might be as early as January.
guys have a discount. What are the additional students coming in January? Are they, didn't I read something that there were going to be some additional students coming to the early college in January, or did I not?
The only thing in January that I recall from the questions submitted to you all was the second one. There is a need for additional space as early as January. What is the plan for accommodating AEC students at the Alexander campus? That was the only January reference that I recall.
So there's no new students coming in, that's just, if that does happen.
Unless, of course, welding grows.
Well, yeah,
And
yeah.
we would want it to.
Well, that's good.
That's a good thing.
As
But
far as early college.
no new early college
It's still August.
Correct, correct.
And just real quickly, if I might, to bring up some of the questions. There was a list of questions presented by the CVCC and the early college, or from the early college regarding the facilities. And I think that Mr. Campbell and I talked about this briefly last week. Just to cover this sort of last point, and then maybe the CVCC folks, if they want to excuse themselves, move on to the other item on the agenda. We have no idea what, or there's some concern, I don't say we have no idea, there's some concern or some ambiguity in the responsibility of CVCC, Alexander County Schools, and the county commissioners on the building. With the increased use of the building, the CVCC primary building and the applied technology building by the school system, we need to know what our role is and what our responsibilities are. And we don't know what your arrangement is, if there was an agreement or a memorandum of understanding or something along those lines. And if not, if that's something that could be developed by representatives of CVCC, the commissioners, and the school board, because I know there's increased custodial needs and those types of things that need to be addressed, and maintenance, janitorial, all of that stuff, security, that we don't know anything about. And so one of your questions was, I think, that you felt like people were saying that you were requested to pay for things that you weren't. I don't know that that's the case, but we want to contribute what we need to for what the increased wear and tear on the building is, or increased needs for the building are. So is that possible for the three of us representatives to come together and do an MOU?
I think it's possible there's two agreements with CVCC and Alexander County. One is for both campuses. That's all.
The Alexander Center, one's for the applied technology.
That's right. There's two 20-year leases for both. And there are no agreements or maintenance or custodian. We provide the service really as best we can. That's how it's worked. But there's no written agreement for any of that.
Do you think that would be helpful?
It'd be helpful.
Because
to us,
I do.
It'd be
It's helpful for everybody.
We get requests about things there, so it'd be helpful to us, because we can't paint the walls every time somebody wants us to.
Sure.
Or, we can't take out trash 3 times a day, or we can't clean the carpets, a couple times a month. We can't do things like, we don't
Right.
have to be able to do that. We have 7 maintenance people for all our county facilities. So, and with children in the facility, it also changes the role of maintenance, because we utilize other alternatives.
We understand.
So I think that would take
We're
care
trying
of.
to get every bang for the buck we can,
Yeah.
Well, could maybe Rick, Dr. Hefner, or one of these two gentlemen that be the group, and let them sit around the table and, you just list all the expenses and the things that come up and say, I can sign up for 1, 2, 3, can't do 6 through 9. You guys, will you take that on? And that way when that invoice comes in, who owns it?
We can do like most of the other, like when your child's going to first grade, you get this neat little letter home that says, hey, please bring on open house night 3 rolls of this and 2 packs of this and 4 boxes of, 4 things of Lysol wipes and 6 things of hand sanitizer. We just say, hey, bring this many rolls of
Rick, are you good? You
Yes,
represent us?
I-
Because it needs to be, because I've had some energy around who pays for what, and I did some research, and I know that originally I think it's $1 million grant that CVCC obtained to
Well, actually, I
inject.
think it was a part of the bond.
Part of the bond money.
Bond money, injected that capital into the upfit of the building, which, that's a real skin in the game. And so that's important, and that's very, very well received.
The level of maintenance, and I think that's where I think statutorily, we're responsible for providing, paying for the utilities and for the maintenance and custodian. But I think now it's gotten to a whole different level than we've ever experienced, where there's different issues with it as far as.
You mean
numbers.
because
There's more people
high
that are
school
used to it.
students are there, and they're not
There's
quite
more
as.
there, and there's even new issues. There's the issue we talked about, but we haven't really talked much about before, was security. We don't provide
In
security.
all our buildings.
Yeah, and we don't provide security at our buildings. So,
And
I understand their concern.
May add one little thing here and along those lines, and our county model is a little different than Catawba's, or any adjacent counties. But, due to the size of what we have going on, CVCC would, over in Hickory, we would have staff maintenance that are doing those duties, and then through the budgetary process with Catawba County, those would get funded, and then would get paid from the college side. It would be a CVCC employee. Whereas here, it's a little bit of a hybrid, different situation, but as you're growing, that's kind of where we're right there in that mix. So it's a different model over here currently. So therefore, the college has not necessarily come knocking on the door about maintenance, because you're covering the maintenance in with what you're doing with maintenance everywhere else in the county.
Not quite enough work there for one person to do
right.
full-time maintenance person.
So I think everybody's in agreement with that it would be beneficial? Okay. Mr. Fansler, does that takes care of most of your questions as
Yep,
far as?
Indeed, yep, it does.
Anybody want to take a 5-minute break?
Yes, let's go.
All righty. We'll take a 5-minute recess. This question. the CVCC. And then after that, I think we're moving on to the other item on our agenda, which of course you're welcome to stay, because it's always fun. But if you want to excuse yourself at the CVCC representatives after the last question, unless there's anything else from the floor. One of the questions that was asked was, how can we be assured that the appropriate CVCC courses that are offered to the early college students, how can we be assured that the appropriate classes are offered so that they will be able to graduate in 4 years with a degree?
We've been, of course, with the early college, Challenger Early College, we've been running a similar program for 10 years, and we are experienced with that. But we do have an obligation when a student starts any curriculum program that we will offer the classes for them to complete that program. So it's, even if in the past we had a program that maybe didn't continue for some reason, we still do a teach out and we teach those classes. So we're committed to offering all the classes required for the transfer degree.
Okay.
And Dr. Mackey, in the event need arises to change, like I know that we've been talking about course mapping since the time we wrote the application, because we had to have something in there that indicated what we would expect students to do each of their 4 years in high school. So in the event change is necessitated, how much lead time will we have to make that change? Because I know that some of the children even have voiced a concern, that's not what my 4-year plan looked like. That course was not in my 4-year plan. So talk a little bit about how we determine that and when we find out so we can communicate to students and parents.
Well, of course, we want to communicate that as early as possible, but a lot of it depends on resources, finding qualified faculty that are available and having them available to your time to teach classes that fits with the high school schedule. So there may be, on main campus, there, like a psych class may be offered 6 or 8 times a week. But here we're looking at offering that class probably 1 time. So so it's a little different situation, but if we see that there's going to be a problem with a particular class, we of course alert you just as soon as possible. But I do think, given that we're new and we're all working on this together, that the course plan that was maybe sent in with the original application be the same courses, but they may be offered in a different order.
So you feel like the same courses that we wrote in the grant will be offered eventually, but in a different order?
And
Okay.
there's only certain courses that are accepted by the 16 state universities for
Right.
the credit they're intended for.
Right.
So that's the core of what
And
we're
how
sticking to.
how are we currently working cohort and CCP in with the early college? Are we trying to capture some of the same courses?
We do have some of the same courses overlap. What we have tried to do is leverage our resources, especially with faculty. So if they come to, if they're not residents of Alexandria County, but they come here to teach, they may teach an early college course some point in the day, and they may teach a CCP course at some point in the day as well. Of course, they both transfer.
Okay. And in the multi-campus status, when that is reached, clarify for me again the permanent staff that would be in Alexander County.
Well, we'd like to have student support, so that's going to be student services, which would help with advising and registering the students. I'm sorry, I haven't meant, so I apologize. But
I just finished mine.
Possibly financial aid.
I had to bite. Yeah.
Faculty, of course, determine which faculty we think would be teaching most classes. I'm hoping we can, I would like to move to our goal all along is to help with 4 degrees here in Alexander County. So I'm hoping that having faculty that are housed here on this campus is a goal as well.
Okay. And then at one time, did we talk about media services would be part of that as well?
When you say media services, do you mean
Like a library, that sort of thing, and a position to follow that as as far as more resources for the students.
Right, we do have support for technology currently as part of our staff.
Anything else for CVCC?
If a student leaves early college or CCP, goes back to the traditional route, do they lose their courses? They still get those credits?
Yes.
College
credits?
They still get the credits?
As long as they finish the courses of C or better, those credits, yes.
I assume that keeps them on track in the regular high school to graduate and the courses that they took at CVCC. Okay.
Okay. All right, thank you all very much.
Stay if you want.
I'm gonna have so much fun in one day.
We'll wait for the day.
You can get a whole week.
Leaving David with all the snacks.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, look at that.
Thank you.
Take care.
The only other item really on our agenda was our local allocation. I think our board posed some questions to you, to the county commissioners. And one of the questions that was brought up by all of the Board of Education members was, what are the plans for the $1.3 million earmarked for economic development, the school system, or community college? I know that money can only be used for those three things, and we were wondering, what are your plans for that revenue?
Well, 400,000 of that has been designated for the school system. The rest of the funds at this time are going to be spent towards economic development. There's been a number of things that the county has addressed. All those have related to either grants for economic development or, for example, we're doing a sewer project for Surete, and our match was about $150,000, so that money came from those funds. There was a grant for a pump station at the industrial park, and our portion of the grant was almost $300,000. That money came from there. The county has received, or is going to receive, about $10 million in low interest loans, about $5 million for water, about $5 million for sewer. The sewer portion of it, the debt service of that's going to be paid with those funds. There will be other things, and the board hasn't taken an official stand, but I would think that that's sort of the direction they were going.
Okay.
The water pays for itself.
Yeah, the water pays for
Water is
itself.
not paid on any tax revenue. Water.
Yeah, also.
Make sure.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, we made that point very clear at our meeting last week. The water systems in Alexander County have never required any taxpayer money. They're an enterprise system, which means, yeah, they pay for themselves. So the county's never had to actually put any money into water systems.
Sewers and other deals.
Yeah.
Well, and the other phase of that, the connectivity issue that we're hopefully addressing now too, at some point, who knows what that's going to do, but hopefully that will be expanded and
Be
more
nice.
people have access, and that'll spur business as well.
And it's
Sewer, water, and internet.
We are
That's the
working
big
on,
three.
I'm sorry, I thought you were skipping to it. We're just working on a lot of different things, as you guys are too. So, I just want to reiterate, go back, your questions to ours, to us, there was 15 questions, I think 9 questions were budget oriented. So, I've said this, I'm gonna say it again, we need to have a funding formula, and, that's what we need to work out. So there's no questions about this.
Are you speaking of a percentage funding formula?
I don't know, we just need a funding formula.
We had actually started down that path last year, we just didn't get the traction. But that is something that is think Davie County uses one, if I'm not mistaken, that we kinda got a copy of.
Yeah, I think it was 40%, and you guys went, ooh. And we went,
There's a lot of
yay.
things in there.
No, it was just a sample, I'm kidding.
I
I'm
mean,
kidding.
we could probably do 40% as long as nobody else in the county ever needed anything else other than
That's right.
education.
I wouldn't
You know?
promise 40, I wouldn't promise 40 just yet. I kind of feel like I'm on an island right here.
Do you want
And I promise.
You're snack man.
I promise.
Move on over.
I promised that I wouldn't kick Ryan in the shin, and I'm not going to. I think it's important for conversation. We do need a funding model that kind of keeps pace with things. And in 2004 and 5, school funding as a percent of the tax levy was 47.64 of the entire tax levy. And we realize there's been 5 tax increases. Well, as it stands now at 79, the school funding as a percentage of the tax levy is 29.75%. Well, we can't make all that up in a year's time. But if we could find some percentage, some type of kicker that doesn't put the commissioners in a bind.
Well, and as you know, David, I don't know if you finished, but the growth rate in the county on our taxes is very low, 1%. Last
Right.
year was like 1.2.
Right.
We've had years when it's been negative,
Yes.
and with our sales tax pot of money, which is like 3.5, which is not very much,
Right.
if it grows 10%, it's not, in the scheme of things, it's not a lot of money.
That's right.
If you look at the values of property going back to 2000, almost 10 years ago, it's almost identical to what it is today.
You're right. Our only hope is our sales tax
Yeah.
continues to improve. And we understand, or I understand as a citizen, that, you know, the Association of County Commissioners, they actually used Alexander County as a template for their projections.
Right.
And I think that the actual sales tax has exceeded even what they projected, the additional revenue. So, you know, I wouldn't anticipate a Board of Commissioners being able to change the, you know, from where they used to fund 46, 47%. There's no way to, there's no way.
Not anytime soon, that with the
But-
current economic status,
Right.
there's just that, you know, and a funding formula would be great.
But if your
But let's
sales
be
tax-
realistic,
yeah.
if you got 1% growth, and
Yeah.
you've had, the last 2 years, you've had negative, what you're gonna do is gonna be something that we all agree on that's flat, and I don't think that's where the problem is.
It would have to be, I would advocate tying it somehow, because a lot of your debt service is gonna be tied to your sales tax anyway.
Yeah.
Or your expanded sales tax revenues. You know, there's no way to, in my opinion, to hit a consistent number, but surely we can find some range between what the county used to be able to do compared to what, you know, what's occurring.
But you're just taking one number, David.
Yeah, I am.
Total dollars.
You're taking
Yeah.
one number.
Right.
And you can't say
And actually,
that
it's a
one number
percentage.
is,
Right.
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
has to do
Because
with
we
everything.
can't, it's hard to, it's easier to convey a percentage than it is a dollar, because you can't know from year to year what your sales taxes are gonna do.
Right.
So, we just have some buildings to build, and we can't continue to lose population, because for each student we lose, that's $6,000 out the door, whether it's a parochial school, a Christian school, a home school. You know, we can't bleed $6,000 a clip and continue to offer the services that we offer. There's just,
And David,
just can't.
as you know, and the board is here, as you know, in town government, county government, you have so many things that you have to fund and participate in funding wise. You know, wasn't that long ago where we built new law enforcement detention center. Commissioners spend we put $250,000 in the sheriff's budget every year for new vehicles, for example. that's a given. So many of the cars will get replaced on a regular basis, and they put a lot of miles on those vehicles. There's just so many issues. You mentioned DSS, and there's health department and so on. There's just so many big needs that we have, but we just don't have the funding. That's why I think economic development is one of the keys for us. Of course, as you grow, there's a downside to that. But it's not going to be an easy road, and you've used the term before, rebuilding. I think that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build the future.
Most citizens don't understand that when you have a larger jail and you house more people in that jail, if they get sick or they have a medical emergency, it's on the county.
If they have a heart attack, it's on us.
They pay for that.
If they have a toothache, it's on us.
The county a few years ago, spent $1.8 billion, paid for it over 3 years for the property at CVCC, which included the applied technology building, and both the buildings, and about 21 or 22 acres of property. I mean, it's just always things you want to get positions, and that's early in the process, which Ryan was talking about earlier, and everybody was sort of talking about. I mean, it's just, there's so many things, and you can't do much with what you have, and you can't live on your fund balance. You got to be really careful about living on your fund balance, or you'll get yourself in trouble, and you'll have a big tax increase.
So we had that. I mean, we had no fund balance.
Right.
And the only way to get a fund balance, I mean, taxpayers pay for a fund balance. At the end of the day, we had to have them step up because we were at a point, we couldn't borrow money. I mean, we wouldn't pass muster. We would not underwrite. So.
And I can tell you, this board of commissioners does not like budgeting. And so we don't do as many as we used to. We do the ones that we have to do, but we do budget amendments for if we get grants, and we've got, like the town has, we've gotten a lot of grants. And you've got to. We couldn't make it on a lot of things unless we could get either federal or state grants.
But to summarize, we went down the path of a formula last year. We just did not get traction. I think we need to, so that ends so everybody knows, if you hit this benchmark, here's what it means.
Or just number of students, would you want to do that? So we fund and then student population goes, that wouldn't work either.
Well, it would. I know. Well, it wouldn't work on the facility needs, but if there's only, truth be known, it makes great political fodder to say, oh, you fund us at 97% out of 115 schools. But that's not, that might be good for political fodder, but at the end of the day, it's really, how do you fund us compared to the 20 counties that are similar to Alexander County? And the LGC and the state treasurer, they base things on population, not on incomes. So if you took your per capita expenditures on education and just said, we're going to try to move this $5 a year per capita, you know, that's a significant amount. But, you know, take it out of the conversation that it's 97th out of 115 school units. That's not a fair comparison. It's really not. Because we don't have to have a lot of the amenities that other systems may waste money on.
Well, then there's other things too that are not factored in there.
Yes. But any upward movement in per student, and I would take Commissioner Mayberry's offer on per student, because that's pretty small, in my opinion. But I think the number that we're at is, it's low in the 20 that you're compared to. But, you know, it's not to kick somebody in the shin. It's just
But I think you also got to look at those counties and see, I mean, you take Caldwell County. They have a lot more retail.
They do.
I mean, when you look, who has, there's 2 shopping centers in the whole county, one on down there at Walmart and then one in Bethlehem.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to get an accurate comparison of a, you know, so we're going to just have to recognize who we are.
And if you look at their sales taxes,
there's no comparison.
There's no comparison.
Well, and at some point, when you look at these numbers as a percentage of the income created by, or you know, tax levy. I don't like the word levy, but I guess that's what it is. a county, I mean, just giving, I mean, just using a random example, Catawba County, which is a much, much larger tax base, at some point, if the county, from an economic perspective, is healthy enough, you have plenty of money. So it's very easy to fund the school system at a higher percentage, even if it's not absolutely necessary. There's this there's the, hey, we want to try to be in line, but looking at it from a percentage, okay, Burke County's funding at 34.89%, but they're also taking in 43.9 million, where we're taking in 20. Well, if we were taking in 43 million, we could give the schools a lot more money than we, and I know Burke County has larger other expenditures too, but, I don't think there's any, yes, we're trying to compare apples to apples, but, we're comparing a really nice one that grew at Jimmy Lowe's orchard versus one that grew in my backyard. Yeah, and there's not a good way to say, okay, this is absolutely, if every county government had the same amount of money, and, then we could say, oh, look, we fund as much, and I think we'd all agree we'd love it. If the money was there, we would love to, allocate more of it to the school system, because if you ask us, what's more important? The education of every child in the county, or social services, which is used by a portion of the county, or the health department that's used by a portion of the county, or, the senior center, the library, all these other, recreation, which a lot of these things are very small, and some are bigger than, some of them are bigger than the school system. DSS's budget's way bigger than ours. But, there's no easy way for us to say, hey, this is how much this is what we can afford, and this is how much we'd like, this is, there's this is how much we can afford, then there's this is how much we'd like to get to do, or be able to do, and then there's the real deal, okay, where are we? And, and I don't mean to go back to, we have to remember who we are. We're not Mecklenburg County, we're not Catawba County, we're not Arnold County. So, I don't know, even with trying to compare us to other counties that, have similar tax bases and whatnot, who knows, their health department they may not spend near as much money in their health department as we do. Or they may not spend as much money, they may not have a senior center. I don't know, so.
Well, let me say one thing.
We have increased what you sent to school,
Yes, you
just
have.
in the last couple of years.
You have.
As a board.
Over $1
so-
million, I believe.
Yeah. So we're not against funding, but, we gotta fund it at a level we can fund it at.
What was that, 20%, 20%, 25%, somewhere in 2020, 25% increase, wasn't it?
It was like 5 million for when we were on the school board forever, and then a lot of things changed, population.
Got debt service.
5 million.
There's some debt service that has gone away, and that was another question too.
150.
150.
Auditorium pad.
And of course,
Yeah.
our debt service portion of that is not.
Right.
So really, when the county took away that 150, that is a loss to our.
That's a true
Because
loss.
we still have that debt service.
What is the school system's debt service per year? On the
You got auditorium,
Actually, Rick, you have that.
I don't have that.
Or, the county, we'd have that information.
I think the original agreement was, there was a dollar figure attached to it. It was $2 million. Without amortization schedule included in that.
Right.
So that, the amortization schedule affects us. So, we're not to the end of that. So really that 150,000 is a loss to our
agreed for whatever.
Pay $2 million. We paid it off last
Paid
year.
$2 million.
Right.
So the agreement was fulfilled?
Yes, oh, yes.
Okay. Okay, well, I just.
Well, and there was a question also about the contingency, and I think we put in contingency, now I don't think we earmarked it, but we built in contingency in our budget this past year. Was it $400,000 total, I think?
About 500,000.
500,000, that we just, because we hadn't been doing that, and quite frankly, it's just good common sense to be able to have some contingency. And again, it's not earmarked for any individual thing.
When we did part of that was.
We knew part in the back of our minds.
It helps.
Programs, I mean.
And we had some programs that help underprivileged children and stuff that grant was not funded. And that, you know, we all grovel for grants, that's what happens. But, you know, we were in a situation where we had a whole group of students, 21st Century's Learning Grant that was not funded for the first time in eons. And, you know, that was our most vulnerable children. Well, the county stepped up to the plate and helped us with half that, you know, in December. So, you know, most folks don't realize there's so many pots of money that, but at the end of the day, for the Alexander County school system, is we can't keep bleeding fund balance. And y'all can't either. The fact is you can change your fund balance. We can't, other than stop using it to send folks home. That's really the only way we can reduce our fund balance use. But we have no mechanism to restore our fund balance. And most of the community has no idea how our fund balance got built up with an American Recovery and Reinvestment Act monies as a part. A lot of other systems went and hired a bunch of new folks and used that money. Well, that money came to an end, and those jobs came to an end. But, you know, we as a school board, and hopefully there'll be new members on school boards going forward, and they can wrestle with this problem. But we can't continue to bleed down our fund balance. And, you know, we can't sell or ask Wittenberg to be sold or Ellendale to be sold, because if someone comes in and they set up a school, say you got $300,000 out of Wittenberg or $500,000 or whatever. If they set up a school, the math is easy. That's $6,000 a student you lose. You know, if they pull 100 students, you've lost money on that deal in 1 year.
Well, what about something that's not a school?
Well, the only way to ensure that is tear the buildings down. Really.
Yeah, sadly, the buildings, the
Well,
Wittenberg's kind of a negative.
And we've discussed that, I mean, we've discussed that amongst ourselves unofficially, and, you know, we understand completely that if old Wittenberg Elementary was bought by somebody and turned into, you know, and was reopened as a private school, or, you know, that it would not be good for the school system and or the county.
We can't sell it with a restriction except to the first purchaser. So you could only restrict it one time, and then it's out of our hands, and so.
You know, and then on the flip side of that, Ellendale Elementary, the location, what do you put there? I mean, and I'm saying, you know, I mean, if somebody bought it for any use, what do you put there? It's not a high traffic, you know, it's not
It's
a
actually
highly
in better
desirable.
shape. It's in a lot better shape.
Yeah, I mean, as a facility, it is in better shape, and that's.
But it's not gonna be very long.
Yes.
We just condemn it. And I've said this and probably said it to everybody here, but the school system, you guys are gonna have to make tough decisions going forward. You're gonna have to. And the pressure from charter schools, the pressure from homeschooling, private schools, it's only going to grow. It's not going to go away. It's going to get worse. And, you know, I wasn't elected to make those decisions. You guys were. But you're going to have to make some tough decisions going forward, whether it's realign the districts, whether it's close some that may be, there's gonna be pressure, and it's gonna continue. And I know, I haven't served on the Board of Education, these three guys have, he's been in the school system. I can answer for myself and say that, you know, we're gonna try to support you as much as we can, but we can't, you can't come to us as your catch-all and to, hey, you know, you guys take care of this.
Mr. Mayberry, we know we make the decisions for the school system, and we're not asking any of you guys to make that decision for us. We went through a year of hell, excuse me, over closing the school, which none of us wanted to do. But all we heard was, you've not asked. So if we don't ask, we're not doing our school system justice. And if we don't ask until we are turned down multiple times, we're not doing our system justice. So it is our job to fight for our school system and to fight for every school that we have. And we don't want to close a school. So if we don't fight to the nth degree, we've not done our job. So we know it's our decision. And a board down the road may have to make that decision. I hope not. But we're gonna ask every day if we have to. I mean, if we don't come to you guys and ask, we can't go out and get money. So you're our only choice.
One question I have, going back to the contingency fund, if we had to revert after our numbers came in, and, you know, and I also say the state projections for the last 2 years have been much worse. You know, we've not had the losses that DPI, you know, projected that we would have. But if we had the loss where we would have had to revert, was that contingency fund a possibility to cover that reversion?
I think that contingency, I mean, specifically to that, Harry, no, I don't necessarily think it was just for that. I just think it was a cushion. Would that have been a valid reason to ask? Yes. Yeah. And if you say, the question you mentioned, what the numbers that came in, the 20 days. So what is that looking like? Because that was.
Based on the 20th day, we will not have to revert money back to the state.
Now,
So
we
that's
talked about.
funded, you have to lose 100, isn't that correct, before they?
If you are
Take
100 fewer than what you are funded at, then you do have to revert back money
But anywhere from 0
to 99.
It's still the same.
But, and then the next year, is that recalibrated for the next year based on your current enrollment, or for the next year, or how they do that?
I don't know their formula. I just know what
you
number
dodged a bullet this
right,
year.
Right.
Yes.
Basically.
Mhm.
But does that mean you're in the crosshairs next year?
Dodged the bullet for many years.
Yeah, we've been fortunate to be under 100.
Well, I think my question, leading up to this question, since we did have a loss of the 150, would there be conversation to restore that 150 for this year?
Out of the contingency.
Out of the contingency, considering that we did not have a reversion back. I think that's a legitimate question.
It is, but the contingency wasn't set up just
Oh, I know
for
that.
that.
I know
You
that.
know,
I know it wasn't set up just for that.
One thing that I would say, I didn't have any idea how much different being on the Board of Education and being a county commissioner were. When I was on the school board, you know, we would meet, I remember sitting down, sitting in that room right there, me and, when I was on the budget committee, me and Jack Koch, and I don't remember who, and Darrell Robertson, you know, and it was just kind of, I don't know, but, one thing that I'm proud of, and, you know, you can ask these guys, I'm the loudmouth tightwad of the Alexander County Commission. I run my mouth too much, and I complain about money way too much. And I've kidded I kid, I am much more frugal with county money than I am my own. And you can ask my wife or anybody. But one reason our fund balance has gotten healthy is we have sent, in the, almost 3 years that Milton, Ronnie, and I, Milton and Ronnie and I our whole thing was, county's wasting a bunch of money. We need to get on there and we need to fix that. Or at least that's what I thought. I don't know what they were thinking. And so we came in and we were like, look, and Rick got really tired of us saying, we want you to shop this, we want you to shop it. I mean, we made him shop the vending machines in all the county buildings. I mean, the people that service the dadgum vending machines to see if we could save $100. And we've been very frugal. A lot of it doesn't show. A lot of it nobody sees. And that's what has allowed us to build fund balance. I mean, that's one of the things that we wanted to do was get fund balance back to where, to the percentage that, that's recommended for our size, for the size of our county. We understand that, if the school board happened to go broke, guess who gets to pick up the tab? The county. If the county goes broke, guess who picks up the tab? Nobody. And when and basically, I think we've done so, we made some unpopular decisions pertaining to employee benefits and all kinds of things that you don't want to touch, you don't want to mess with, because it saved a little money. And that's what's allowed us to have, I know at least the last 2 years, we have come in the end of the year under budget significantly. Because a budget is just that, it's a budget. And I had an economics professor that said, if you're over budget, you need to make your budget bigger. If you're under budget, you need to make the budget smaller. I mean, a budget is just that. It's not a, hey, we don't see the county budget as, okay, we have this many $1 million and we got to spend it by December. That's not how we see it. And I'm not saying, I don't mean that, that may have come off wrong. I didn't mean that I assumed that that's what the school system does, because that's not, that's not what I'm, but we, from the outside looking in, it's just like with the facility for the early college or whatever, we're seeing is, okay, there are these other options that already exist. They may not be perfect, but they'd be a lot more affordable, maybe a lot more economical, and that's kind of what we see. Now, we don't have all the information about the early, about the school system that you guys do, and quite frankly, don't need it. But I think that, and this is me speaking for me. If we see that the school system is, hey, we're doing everything we can, and we're running as lean as we can run and still be successful. Which I know, we're running pretty lean.
That's where we're at.
Well, you sit and talk about the ways that you try to, or that you did cut expenses so that you could build to your fund balance. We've done the same thing. The only problem is we still can't add to our fund balance.
Right.
We've captured every position possible through attrition.
I'm
now to the point that I'm combining positions such as media coordinators and such, changing out lights to LED lights to help with energy efficiency. Everything that I can grasp at, I'm trying to do. But the problem is we're still bleeding fund balance to balance the budget. And if we go any leaner, I can tell you it will negatively impact student achievement.
And we're catching it, and people may not think that they might not rank these positions as, but I do, as I said, Joyce. Now at Stony Point and Sugarloaf, they used to have full-time librarians. Well, now it's half-time. So we keep digging back, and you can look, now see, that's another thing the school system can't do. The employee raises are set by the state, and some of that money has to be made up at the local level. Well, you can look at the county's personnel cost and what they've done. They've increased over time, and you had to make some maneuvers that you alluded to, and that's understandable. But, you know, we're getting at the point where, you know, we're talking about half-time librarians, you know, and we'll get right back to the TA conversation that we had a few years ago. You know, you can look at the state treasurer's website, and you can see that, yes, what you said, you have been under budget for several years, but bear in mind your budget has grown, but from about, you know, 32 million to almost 38 million. But ours can't grow like that, and so we've been in digress, and we just, you know, whether it's these school board members sitting here or an entire new batch, they're going to face the same problem. So, but you know, I'm not even in the Sugarloaf district, but my phone's sure been burned up about, you know, a half-time librarian because they used to have a full-time librarian. And I'm thinking, you know, let me refer you to your Sugarloaf representatives.
Thank you, Dave.
Or Stony Point representatives. But, you know, it's real. When you start sending folks home, I mean, we're not going to say, well, it's not our fault. We only have so much money to work with. You know, call Ryan. We're not going to do that. Never would we do that. But we need to put some folks in early college. And it looks like it might be in a mobile unit, which I detest those mobile units. But in the short term, that might be what we have to do. But if we had a place to put them over on the same side of the school, but see, y'all own that land. I don't know if we could be squatters there on the same side of the original college in the short term till we can get something long term. You don't have to answer that tonight. I'm just throwing it out there.
And that's, you know, what we're talking about, all these things, you know, we don't have the money for this or that, we're having half-time librarians, what are we gonna do? And then we're talking about building a new high school. You know, that's hard to justify. I know that. I know that.
Okay.
But that was one of the.
Okay, I'm with you.
And
That's hard to justify to the taxpayers of Alexander
It
County.
may not be a new building, but we also know part of the reason we developed the early college was because the SEEDS report showed that we had those 5 major areas, and you've addressed 3 of the major areas at the Applied Technology Building. The other 2, which were education and health.
Healthcare.
That's why we chose the degrees that we did for the early college to those folks. So we're trying to help with economic development. Some of our questions were directed to you folks as, how can we partner? What do you need from us? You know, how can we better serve your vision of building and improving economic development? And that was part of the impetus for the early college. That, and so that we're competitive with surrounding counties. And so it's not building a new school. I don't think anyone in this room thinks we're building a new building. I think we're going to either have to do modulars or fix up the smaller building, and we'll have to figure out how to do that, and we'll present that to you. But what we're saying is, we've cut as much as we can cut personnel-wise, but we will have to start to send folks home because we have the mandates from the state. We've got, you know, increases in health care and increases in retirement, just like you guys do, that we just have to keep stretching what we have farther and farther. There's what was it, $1 million? I can't remember how much. We just had a budget meeting, but it was a significant amount of increase in health care for our employees.
Almost 1%.
It was 0.8%, which for a big system is a significant amount of money. We got to find it somewhere. You know, we don't get more. And so, like Ms. Ryan said, we're here advocating because maybe we didn't do such a great job of advocating for our system in the past, and maybe we didn't ask for things that we needed help with. But we're asking, and We'll present things to you. We don't expect you to be a panacea for everything, because you guys have your own responsibilities for your departments, not just the school system, and we all appreciate that. But we're trying to reach out to you in an effort to have good communication, to build our relationship. And so you're not gonna be able to say yes to everything, we know that. But we want you to understand where we're coming from.
One good thing too, there's been though that, people sat around the table tonight and interesting community partners have been here, and retired teachers and current teachers and boards and CVCC, and, people just talked, you know. So the more we can sit around and talk and share.
It's good.
And not talk bad about each other will certainly help.
I think so too.
We appreciate that.
And I hate to, you know, cause a big uproar and laughter here, but, have you, you know, have you lobbied the state on increasing your funding? Every day. I know you have. But, so the state is not increasing your funding, and, you know, we've got to pick up the tab.
Right.
And it's either got to come in the form of, you know, a tax increase, or, you know, that, taking it from somewhere else, some other department. It's got to come from somewhere. And so, as long as we all understand that, I'm not saying that we don't do something, but it comes from somewhere.
I would advocate, and I'm just one, you know, the redistribution of the sales tax is really and there's a ebb and flow to it. But, you know, I think 79 cents on the 100, that's enough. You know, that's
We appreciate it.
That's enough. But the sales tax, actually the sales tax has been outperforming all, you know, I hope a bubble doesn't bust. I hope people will continue to shop local. Shopping local is very important. That's and plus they expanded what they tax you on now to mechanic services, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, and Dave, one thing that we, you know, we talk about economic development, and Jamie sent us all this email that said, please fill out this survey for I think it was North Carolina County Commission. You know, and it was, and one of the questions was, you know, kind of what's your board's priority? And without a doubt, and we don't mean to, we definitely don't mean to discount education, because that's, I mean, I have 4 kids in the school system. I got one not old enough to be there yet, but I have 5. But economic development, you know, we beat it into our own heads, let alone, you know, and you talk about sales tax. Absolutely, people shopping local. I mean, you know, Gary's back there. I don't know how many of you've watched any of the really cool little commercial things he does on YouTube and all that stuff. We're actually, you know, I'm glad it's him, not me. But, you know, we're trying to do things. We see this problem, we see this problem as not just a, hey, it's right now, you know, it's not just a here and now, it's in the future. And so we're trying to do things like put in infrastructure to try to attract, you know, I mean, do you know what, I mean, you think about what the sales tax, and no, we're not gonna get a Best Buy or an Academy, you know, Sports or something, but you think about just the sales tax revenue from Best Buy over on South Valley Boulevard in Hickory. That would affect Alexander County. Now, to Cobb County, it's dropping the bucket, you know, but, you know, we're trying to do anything and everything we can as the county commission and through, you know, and working with the EDC and whatnot to try to build what creates, you know, what generates that sales tax. And the thing about it is, like infrastructure stuff, it's not, I mean, and we've got a lot, you know, a large zero interest loan that the COG helped us qualify and get, and then, and then the secondary portion of it is a very low interest rate. And, but we're looking at spending money on sewer. And to a lot of people, especially, if I were a teacher, my mom was a teacher. I have a sister that's a librarian in Davie County. My aunt was a teacher. My grandmother was a teacher. I can go on and on. But if I were a teacher, I might look at it and go, why in the world is the county spending all this money on sewer? And and when we need this, when we need that. And I see it. Like I say, my middle school daughter, comes home with a half sheet of paper with her math work on it. And she's legally blind without, and even with her glasses, her vision's 20/40 in one eye and 20/30 in the other. And that's the best it's going to get. Okay? And she has a half sheet of paper with her math homework on it. So we email the teacher and say, hey, is there, can we get a full sheet of paper? And the answer is, if you'll donate some paper. I realize, I get it. And it's crazy that sewer may eventually tie to education. But that's the point, but that's the idea is, what we're trying to, and are we doing everything absolutely perfectly? I doubt it. But, but I understand the frustration.
Go ahead.
Going back, I think what we need to do is probably appoint the formula gurus, get us some model heads on your side and on our side. I think Ryan has the most experience for us in time served as a county commissioner.
Oh, don't do that to me. To come up with the formula. Or maybe it needs to be. Y'all have more experience in education.
Yeah, but the education's supposed to be bringing that experience.
I was a geometry guy. I didn't like algebra.
Well,
formulas are not my thing.
We're not. Somebody says, "Oh, can we have?" We're not going to come like, okay, tonight we feel good about $500,000 or whatever.
Well,
we're not going to
already
get
been invented though. Just
yeah.
find some other formulas that are working and
or blend it with something that's more accurate to us. That's not going to be easy task.
We started there. That's where we started looking at some of the models, and then
just
for whatever reason, I know what consolidation happened, and so things kind of got difficult. But I think we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I think we could start looking.
I'm sure there's plenty of formulas out there.
Yeah.
Do a hybrid like this.
And then you have to test it a little bit in some scenarios. If this happened, this is what it looks like, to make sure you don't have an unintended consequence that, oh gosh, we thought this was the greatest formula in the world, and oh, guess what? You're getting $500,000 less dollars, or oh yeah, you're getting $5 million more, but we don't really have. So you have to build it and test it.
Well, you can do a high-low too.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you do student population in one of these.
But when you look at just using the number, the population of the school system, which makes sense. It does. But as the numbers go down, the fixed overhead didn't change it. We get that. And so I don't know that it can be something tied just strictly to, hey, it's the number of kids. Because that's going to add to the problem.
Yeah.
More than,
It could be a piece of it.
more than, so like I say, I don't know. But could we just make up a bunch of kids, enroll?
You've done pretty well
If everybody can do what Josh does.
Hey, you can. Alexander County DSS offers foster to adopt classes all the time.
So while
Anybody
we're
wants to see
working,
pictures? I got them on my phone.
I'm sorry. While we're working through this, I think one of the things that the school board wants to know is, how we can assist your vision of economic development. So just keep that in mind as we work through all this together, because we really do want to partner with you. I think we all have the best intentions, and we can probably reach some of those, if not most of them, if we work together. The only other question that I think we haven't covered is a yes or no question, so it should be fairly easy. Well, yeah.
Can I make a statement right there?
Yes.
In working together, I think that both boards need to truly realize just that we're on the same team no matter what. You know, we've talked about infrastructure quite a bit, all the, economic factors. You're a realtor. You understand how many people here buy houses that already live here, how many implants come in. The ones that grew up here are the ones that are here. That's the majority. We got the implants that come in. So when we talk about infrastructure, our kids, that's infrastructure also. It all ties into the same pot here. And, the counties around us, just like our county, have the same issues as far as losing that college generation, moving to the better jobs or whatnot. Trade schools here, that's really cool stuff. It really is, because that's the most manufacturing, welding, I think that's great. But I think when we're talking that, and we're thinking, I know you guys are thinking on the commissioner plane, we're thinking on the school board plane. But it's really all tied in hand, because your infrastructure is the kids coming through the school system, period. So, I mean, you need to keep that in mind. This is my 2 cents.
Yeah, well, I'd just like to say along that same line, when I was on the school board, I first came on, not sure, Josh, and I think y'all may have came on at a later time, but it was almost like the old smoke-filled room, first meeting I went to. And I had to actually go and just really dig for information on my own. And then it kind of changed a little bit to where we were delivering books, and then automatically you kind of get some internet stuff going. But we've always, or I know as the board, when I was on the Board of Education, I always put the children as first. What's going to affect them, what's going to be the best for them, and how it's going to work the best. And I think we still, have that in mind. The problem kind of sometimes, I know my house, like 3 kids, they all attend school here. I was born, raised right here. I went to the schools in Alexander County. Man, they had all kinds of requests, read me this, I need that, I need this. And sometimes it was, well, let's see if we can go another way. So, we've got to look for what's the best for the kids and what's the best for, the citizens and taxpayers. We talked about the tax increase. I hate to keep talking about that, but, man, that was about the worst meeting I've ever been to. It was like my dog got run over, I lost a ball game, and, everything was gone. But, you get through those things. And that's what, we've got to keep focusing on the county and what's going to help the county, what's going to help the students, and, all those working together. So, and I think, when we come together and talk like this, everybody gets a good idea of what's going on. It's not like we're in a box over here and somebody else is in a box over there. You see ideas and, you get things working. So, and, I think it's good that we can communicate and talk to each other. And, hopefully no irrational things. So that's good.
That's been a great meeting.
My wife texted me a while ago and said,
Text her back.
We probably need to set some timelines.
I did, I told her.
For some deliverables.
I did. And I
If
put
we don't
no
do
for
that,
it.
we'll be back here 6 months from now having the same conversation. So
I think Milton and myself can be on the funding formula.
So you're volunteering me with you, okay. That'd be good.
Payback.
I'll do it.
We'll do it, when they get somebody else from your esteemed group.
Harry, David, Marty, anybody have an inclination to serve on funding formula? Oh, come on.
You've got a deep government
David would
experience.
be
I
the
would
best
think
one.
you would be.
All right, David,
I'll be
you're not.
happy to.
I'll help volunteer you.
All right. And we'll just set a time, we'll email with some dates and try and get some time.
Yeah, we need probably,
Yeah.
yes, Jeffrey.
Do we need to establish the facility options kind of
I think that
committee
probably
as well?
the school, well, I
Or you
think
guys wanna
that
do
would
that?
probably be our responsibility, I would think.
We need to set a meeting though, when we can.
Yeah,
have y'all come
I think
by
we'll need to
and
get
request
some
pretty quick, probably.
ideas about what our options are for short-term and then long-term. And we are doing, we are currently working on a 5-year facility needs for all of our schedule of, roofs and HVAC and all that stuff. And one of the things I'll just throw out to you guys is we're gonna be having to resurface the tennis courts, which are community, they're ours, but they're community, so we, at some point, might wanna know if you guys could help us get a grant, or if you could help us with that resurfacing. So, that was the only other thing I had.
I think, Rick, you and I talked about that, Rick. That property's vested now. Would that vesting have to change to apply for a grant?
We couldn't apply for a grant this time.
Right, well,
But
it's
that doesn't seem,
something we just we wanted to talk about, not
Yeah.
necessarily today, and I know we're not taking any action today, so just throwing that out.
You know, what the county actually helped in that process the last time when the track was built, and I'm not so sure how good a job they did on the tennis court part of it. It would seem like it was a problem from the beginning.
we don't have Harleys on the tennis court.
Not yet.
Just kidding, I know that was always on.
Don't take that.
That was always
Anything else from
topic of
anyone?
conversation.
Anything I missed that you wanted to cover? Don't want anybody walking away thinking they didn't get a chance.
Oh, this is general early college questions. And right now, I guess I have an opportunity to ask it. As the students at the early college move into their junior, senior year, they're taking college classes primarily. Well, my daughter has told me that based on like CVCC's attendance policy, they can't miss classes, which, I mean, that makes sense. Well, is that going to deter those students from participating in sports or
That was a
other-
question that I posed directly to Dr. Henshaw.
other things?
Because we had a couple hiccups.
Because they have to leave early sometimes?
We had a couple hiccups in the very first PE course that they took. The instructor was going to grade some of them down because they had to leave early for away games. And when I went directly to Dr. Henshaw, he said, we will work through this. This is not an issue.
Okay.
So if I need to do that again.
No, and this may be, this
Okay.
may stem from that.
Okay.
I just wonder because, because we don't want those kids to miss out on.
We want to expand opportunities,
Right.
not decrease them,
Right. And
for all students.
And I had never gotten an answer on that. You know, what 15, 16-year-olds say it and always exactly right.
You mentioned, one more question. You mentioned you're doing a 5-year facility study. You're working on that right now?
Maintenance and things like
Yeah.
that, yes.
Just
It's a schedule.
and I don't mean to bring up a bad subject, I'm wondering, since we're all here.
But you
know,
were doing.
So the DPI study that you had done,
That's not the same thing. This
Okay.
is just maintenance and scheduling and painting and that,
It's a spreadsheet that we update.
Carpet
when some-
that kind of
removal,
thing.
even equipment replacement down to lawnmowers at the different sites.
Okay.
It's a 5-year projection of who needs what when, and it's in those areas.
But it's not anything we haven't had in the past, it's something that's continually updated and.
We're just updating it.
Because that
Like,
facility study y'all had done actually baked in some of that HVAC stuff.
Yeah.
and some of the higher ticket, the roofs and HVAC stuff.
Actually, some of our updating are lasting longer than what they recommended.
That's
So
good.
we've been able to
Yeah.
extend the life a little bit.
And the prices on some of the works actually came in
Lower.
considerably
Lower.
lower than what the study portrayed, so.
Yeah, it's just an update. It's like a to-do list, for lack of a better phrase. Anything else?
Well, in closing, because I've talked about as much as Josh has, but one thing that I think that we all can be proud of, and because the numbers show it, is all our schools in Alexander County, grade-wise, performance-wise, they outperform school systems that are funded at a much greater rate.
Yes.
And that's in the academics, sports, civic involvement. So they prove, our schools prove that they can do a lot with a little. And, you know, that's something that the commissioners should be happy with. You know, that's to be applauded. And that's because of our staff and our
Yes.
system. And we can't give them a raise because we don't set their pay scale. It's done by the state. And they got a raise, and guess what? Their insurance is going to go up. So what did...
Well, Raleigh's done that forever.
Oh, yeah, but we for all the things we fuss about, we're very fortunate.
Oh, great with what we got, and I think, you know, I think the school board does great with what they've got, and I think we do a lot, I think we do pretty good with what we've got too. So,
Oh, yeah.
one other question, and I promise this is the last one. I saw on there on something, it was like, we're 91st or 92nd as far as local funding out of 115 school systems. Okay. I was just looking through that, a while back, and Catawba County, I was just looking at Catawba County, and they were like 65th, something like that, out of local funding. So if you take the state, the federal, and the local, what are we then? Out of those 115, we're still like 90 something, 92.
The highest we've ever been is like 78th or 80th.
Okay.
And, you know, I mean, we can't expect to be
Well,
any better.
I know,
Really.
but Catawba County, when you added all the state, local, when you combined funding, they were 104. Now, how does that happen? I'm just wondering.
We get our information.
We
right.
took it from the commissioner's website as far as the state website.
Well, I mean,
We got that
they're
information.
getting more local funding, but they're getting less state and
They're
federal
getting less
funding for some
something
reason.
else, yeah.
Probably
So-
low wealth.
Low wealth is what I
They
would.
I
don't
would
get
say
low
that they
wealth.
don't qualify.
Well, that was the big swing when our tax
Yeah.
rate went up.
Yeah.
And they're not eligible for ARC either, and there's several other funding mechanisms.
See, they always wanted to partner with us because our demographics were so good to get grants because of all of the, just because of our demographics. But I would assume that a big part of that would be low wealth.
Yeah, that's what.
Well, I just found
Which
that
is-
kind of shocking that they put in so much local and then they ended up behind us in total funding. So,
See, that's actually one great thing, you know, Ronnie was alluding to how painful the tax increase
Yeah.
was. Actually, when you
Went
up the
up on
tax
low
rate,
wealth.
then we got our low wealth money back.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that was nothing to sneeze at.
We had lost over 500,000 a year.
Yeah, we lost over $500,000.
What you get back?
750 was it?
Yeah.
Well, that was a.
You can't
We got
factor
it,
that
we got
into,
that.
the allocation
What it
formula.
was.
That, then, you know, $1 or whatever.
Anything else?
No,
Good.
So y'all don't wanna talk about school board salaries or anything?
Y'all said that.
No, the commissioner said our
Just
salary.
approval.
All right,
Y'all hadn't recommended anything.
Yeah, we're
we'll,
at 120
we'll go ahead and
a month.
adjourn then. Thank you, everybody.
I think you deserve more.